What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was treated like a monster since birth, only to awaken as the reincarnation of a primordial deity? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. He was not sure how he had gotten here. The last thing he remembered was facing Kagaya, Team 7, reunited for one final battle. He remembered the feeling of Hagoromo's power, coursing through his body, strengthening him. He remembered Sasuke, for once, fighting side by side him like the brother he had always yearned for. He remembered the final offensive, with him and Sasuke trying to use the culmination of the yin-yang release to seal the mother of chakra, the look on her face as their hands touched her. What he did not remember was what transpired in the aftermath. He didn't remember the sealing, he didn't remember the aftermath. Hell, he didn't remember actually succeeding. But the entity in his mind, it spoke otherwise. The chaos of the 10-tailed beast was never meant to be embodied. Not in the mind of a single person, at least. Its power was massive, so much so that even keeping it dormant caused Naruto a perpetual dull headache. Even Kurama's sealed hatred form hadn't succeeded in disrupting his inner peace quite as much as the true tailed beast's mere presence did. And that itself was the crux of the problem. The seal wasn't meant to function this way. It was never designed to seal such endless power into a human. The last time this seal was activated, the moon was created. An astral body that the empty body of the Jubi would begrudgingly call home for eons. While that seal had been broken before its time, the seal meant to replace it was, in every way, identical to the original. So, why had it taken the Jubi and deposited it in his body? And subsequently, how had he gotten here? Here, in simple words, was very similar to the astral plane inhabited by Hagoromo's perpetual, disembodied spirit. A realm where no physical entity could, or would, ever disturb his ever-watchful gaze. So mired was he in his transcendent realm of heavenly presence that he hadn't been able to summon Naruto and Sasuke to his realm without them being on the very doors of death. But, if Hagoromo's world was an infinite expanse of white, this world was severely limited in scope. It was an arena, one of the few he had ever seen in his life. Walls endlessly towering up on each side of him, their make indiscernible and foreign. Looking around, all he could find was a singular desk, placed smack dab in the middle of said arena. Curiosity overriding common sense, he sauntered over to it. There was one singular file on the mundane-looking desk. The file itself was nothing out of the ordinary, except for one small detail peeking out from the singular slip of white on it. His name was on the file. My, can't you see the sign on my desk that clearly states that I'm out for lunch? The feminine voice prompted Naruto to turn around. The owner of the voice looked quite out of place in her surroundings. Mostly because of how plain she looked. Behind him stood a woman who would have looked perfectly at home in a shop, or a reception. She was plain as day, with long, brown hair and a receptionist smile. Nothing about the woman felt right, especially in the ethereal world that Naruto so abruptly found himself in. But it was progress. The woman didn't seem as confused as him, after all. And she had a desk. The only people who had desks were people who had their shit together. And the woman in front of him was a perfect example of such a person. "Ah, sorry about that. I was just wondering how I got here," Naruto sheepishly commented, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment. The woman chuckled, apparently expecting his friendly reaction. Naruto caught on to this. How could he not, after all, when the only people that were used to his mannerisms were the ones he had spent his entire teenage life with? It was apparent this woman knew more than she was letting on, and Naruto would get to the bottom of this. But for now, he needed answers. "Pardon me, miss," Naruto hesitantly began. "But where is this place exactly, and how did I get here?" On hearing the question, the woman smiled. Something about the smile put Naruto on edge. It wasn't just any smile, after all. It had a barely restrained omniscient quality to it. This woman knew stuff, much more than he did, at the very least. And she knew that he wasn't capable of understanding half of it. Naruto didn't like being looked down upon, and by merely smiling at him, this woman had managed to completely put him on edge. Said woman then took her seat behind the desk and locked eyes with him. Her smile was unwavering and extremely unnerving. "I think you need to rephrase your question, young one. To explain where we are would be impossible for me. A fact that is in no way helped by the extremely limited intellect you humans possess, she said. No, quoted, as if reading off a script she'd done millions of times before, completely disregarding the angry expression on her companion's face. What you should be asking me, Naruto Uzumaki, is why you are here, she concluded, doing nothing to mince her hurtful words. Naruto held back a string of expletives and asked her the needful. Her smile grew just a little bit. Well, the only reason you can be here is because you died. Naruto stopped for a moment, his breath caught in his throat. It all made sense now. He didn't remember anything because there was nothing to remember. The Jubi was sealed inside him, and that was more than enough to kill any mortal, former Jinchuriki or not. But what that didn't explain was why he felt said power dormant in his body at this very instant. The Jubi was immortal, it definitely couldn't die. So why was it in this state? Sensing his confusion, the woman picked up the file in front of him and began reading. Naruto Namikaze, legally Uzumaki. 17 years of age, died when the target of a sealing attempt was changed to him, locking the fully evolved Jubi inside him. Due to a clause pertained by an elder being, was able to kill an immortal while doing so. She closed the file, dropping it back onto her desk. I believe both you and I know who this immortal is. Your ethereal body is currently disintegrating under the strain of keeping the Jubi's spirit at bay. That was all Naruto needed to snap himself out of his reverie. His body truly was, physically, deteriorating. He could see the tips of his fingers begin to disintegrate as the woman continued to speak, and it was terrifying, especially with how laissez-faire the lady appeared to be about it. You mentioned a clause. What do you mean by that? He asked, eliciting a chuckle from his companion. That would be me, she explained, her tone adopting a hint of mischief for the first time, instead of the bland monotony it has formerly exemplified. And before you ask why, I did it because you, Naruto Uzumaki, belong to me. Naruto took offense to that. He was his own man, made through combat, survival, and life experience. He had no one from the very beginning, and the only people with him at the end were the ones he had chosen to be precious to him. He was the very definition of a self-made man, and this woman, someone who was clearly not human, much less connected to him in any way, claimed to own him. That's bullshit, he exclaimed, only for the woman to raise the file in her hand. This, she began, sounding less like a bored receptionist and now like a tired mother who was telling her child off for the umpteenth time, is a contract that claims that your soul belongs to me through the ages. The power you were born with, the life you were born into. It was all a part of this contract. If you doubt me, you may peruse this at your pleasure. Though seeing your current predicament, it would be in our best interest if I give you a shortened version. The woman then got up and sauntered over to the rapidly disintegrating Naruto. Are you familiar with the game of chess? No? Well, it doesn't matter. It is a game where two armies, black and white, fight each other till one side wins. The only winning condition is the capture of the opponent's king. Over a series of turns, two armies take turns to quell each other. There are 6 types of units. Pawns, which are basic foot soldiers. They are easily dispensable and hence, are the largest in number. Then there are the rooks, bishops and knights. You only get 2 of each, and they are worth a whole lot more than a mere pawn. Then, there is the queen, the strongest unit on the board, funnily enough. And then, there is a king, almost worthless, and in need of constant protection. An acute reflection of human society, though a bit romanticized, she stated, confusing Naruto. Why are you telling me this? He asked, only to be met by the woman's unnerving smile. Her teeth suddenly become sharper and her eyes duller, almost like a serpent watching its prey, knowing there was only one outcome. If you consider the worlds to be chessboards, me and my partner are the players. Except, we just put the pieces on the board, and they play the game out for us. Of course, worlds aren't just normal chessboards. For one, they are much more vast, so there are hundreds, if not thousands of pieces. It keeps things a lot more interesting, she answered. You, Naruto Uzumaki, were once lower than even a pawn on this board. Let us say that the powers inherited by you and the circumstances of your birth are what dictates a piece's worth. In that case, Sasuke Uchiha, a man born with great power, under dire circumstances, and generally revered by the public, was a queen. Naruto felt like laughing, but his disintegrating body reminded him that this wasn't really the time or the place to do so. You, on the other hand, went through the traumatic experience of being orphaned at birth. You were left straddled with a tailed beast that you couldn't hope to control, with no bloodlines to speak of and with no mentor to help you become worthy and powerful. Her smile then dropped, leaving a very serious, business-like expression on her plain face, almost as if the script she'd been reading off had been changed without her knowledge. But you didn't accept your fate. You lashed out, violently. You made friends, despite your heritage and means. You found mentors, and showed them your worth. You earned power, instead of having it showered upon you. You brought yourself into the chess match with an explosion, and ripped through it with impunity. You turned yourself into a piece that defied the basic laws of the game we immortals play. And that is why you find yourself here. Again, chained to a beast and left with nothing. Naruto grunted, neither voicing affirmation or defiance towards her opinion. So what? I did what was necessary to protect the ones I cared for. I don't need to answer to you. And you didn't dictate my actions, so I am barely even linked to you. So, why did you call me here? Was my tortuous life not enough of a punishment? Or do you feel the need to gloat? This, surprisingly, elicited another smile from the woman. This one was genuine, and Naruto could tell. It was the smile parents gave to their children when they were proud. He had seen it on Sakura's mother's face too many times to count. And that itself was more unnerving than the fact that only the upper part of his body was now mired in reality, his limbs having spread into the air around him in minuscule particles, impossible for the naked eye to see. Your circumstances notwithstanding, the fact that you not only defied the rules of our game once, but twice, caught not only mine, but my partner's eye. You broke our universal, unbreakable rules twice, after all. And while similar anomalies have been detected in multiple worlds, you're the only one who has done it twice, in ways that were completely different from one another, she commented. Behind her, a black copy of Sasuke and Obito appeared, both sitting on different thrones of black. Sasuke Uchiha and Obito Uchiha were both queens that belonged to my partner when our game began. As she did this, the statues began to morph. The thrones they sat on faded to white, soon to be followed by the individuals themselves. Contact with you, though, turned them into my queens, that too, without costing me anything. Under duress, pawns can turn into queens, but for an unknown piece to appear, one that can derail fate, able to rise from nothing and change what was originally a small part of an infinitely larger plan into a world-defining event. The circumstances of its creation have to be extraordinary. As she said this, her face was alit with something which could only be likened to orgasmic pleasure, a look of pure bliss and joy blossoming across her face. But as soon as it was there, it was gone. She then pointed towards Naruto. In the next 5 seconds, your body will shift to the board you will now be reborn in. Before you are born again, I will explain why I have done this. Why I have decided to give you a second chance, and what our new, revised contract entails. Naruto was about to ask her another question, only to realize that his mouth had, at this point, dispersed. As the last vestiges of his eyes began to disperse into nothingness, he realized 2 irrefutable facts. He was definitely speaking to a power that was above God itself. And secondly, he really wanted to punch her. The area Naruto found himself in was, for lack of a better word, beautiful. He didn't mean that in the normal sense of aesthetic, gods no. The place was a wasteland. It looked like a cross between a ruin and wilderness. Except, taking one's eyes off the wreckage, the place exuded an almost otherworldly aura. Nature's power was extremely potent here, natural for a sage like Naruto. A purple miasma surrounded him, but he knew that it wasn't poisonous. Else, the world would be crying out in agony and forewarning him, wishing to save its avatar, as was the nature of sages. Truly, the place would have been perfect to be reborn in, except for the inexplicable presence of one gigantic dragon that flew above him. So massive was it that its shadow covered more land than even the largest cloud he had ever seen, and he had seen a lot of clouds, thanks to Shikamaru and his habit of lazy cloud gazing. The creature was massive, and its power could easily be felt all the way to where Naruto stood, yet he knew that the creature was no match for the Jubi. And that is when he noticed that his headache was gone, and so was the Jubi's conscience. Beautiful, isn't it? His companion asked, appearing next to him. There was no flash, she merely wasn't there before, and then she was. He noticed the change in her attire, though, although the rest of her remained the same, as bland as ever. Her formal clothing was gone, replaced by long, flowing robes. A crown of thorns sat on her head, and in her right hand, she held a scepter topped by an effigy of two eastern dragons locked in combat. That all was trivial, though. What really made a difference was that he could now feel her power. And it made the power of the Jubi feel insignificant in comparison, a drop of water compared to a tap. Maybe trying to punch her wasn't such a great idea after all. If you're wondering why you're in such a desolate land, don't worry, you're not being reborn here, she stated, dashing Naruto's hopes. This is merely an interstitial land, a place where the things that the powers that be forget wash up. One day, you will return here to claim an artifact that will help you on your journey. While she explained his situation, she pointed towards a tower in the distance. When Naruto had just appeared in this world, mere minutes ago, before the dragon had drawn his attention, he too had noticed a surge of power emanate from the tower. Almost as if there was someone or something in there, calling his name. It was by no means an unpleasant feeling, but it was rather sad that the feeling would stay like so till he could finally resolve it. Which brought him to his next question. So, how long till I'm able to make my way here? He asked, prompting his companion to adopt a thinking posture. Honestly, she began, you could make your way here anytime you feel it is necessary. But I would recommend waiting. The two powers that reside in this dimensional gap are very territorial. To claim your reward, you will have to fight them. Knowing their powers and yours firsthand, I'd wager the fight would last months. So, it would be best to come here when there is no one, or nothing, awaiting your return. Naruto nodded, accepting the answer as the best he would possibly get. And what about the Jubi? He questioned. His power seems to have become one with my own. My chakra reserves are massive, and my eyes, they feel different. Did you have something to do with this? The woman nodded, confirming his theory. You should look into this, she spoke, materializing a small, handheld mirror out of nowhere. Naruto took it from her, and was shocked at what he saw. He had the Rinne Sharingan in his left eye. The coveted third eye of Kagaya. The connotations of his newly acquired eye was not lost on him. With the massive reserves of chakra left behind by the Jubi, he could very well destroy the entire world at will. Not that he wanted to do that, of course. You'll need it to fight the enemies you will face, the woman commented. Noticing him looking in the mirror. My companion, Kath, is quite angry due to the fact that I hold your contract. The fact that I'm using you to replace this world's king, a creature who died to a neutral piece, has made him extremely angry at me. Hence, he too, will be able to bring multiple powerful pieces into play. She said all this matter-of-factly, as if she wasn't speaking of beings capable of bringing about the destruction of the world manifold. Neutral pieces? What are those? Naruto asked. The woman's explanation had made it clear that she and her companion, Kath, waged war using their own pieces. Equating the game of chess to shogi, a game favored by the people of his time, Naruto was able to deduce that these neutral pieces were not normally a part of chess either. The woman seemed to have caught on to his train of thought, though. Neutral pieces are the will of the world. They are creatures who are not defined by us, not created by us, and cannot be manipulated by us. The two creatures that inhabit this plane are neutral pieces. In your world, the tailed beasts were neutral pieces. Every single creature that hasn't been pitted in combat by either me or Kath are neutral pieces. Hence, they outnumber us by the millions though, most of them aren't powerful enough to stand in your way. The last bit was added as an afterthought, possibly to pacify Naruto, who was understandably getting a bit jittery. So, you're going to put me in this universe as your greatest asset. But why? Naruto asked, his list of questions running thin, and the answers he was getting were less than adequate. The woman's face grew ever so slightly grim, showing Naruto that he was, at least, making some progress. This world is on the precipice of a war. A war where sworn enemies fight together against foes that beguile their very existence. The last time this happened, both me and Kath lost our kings. And this time, without our kings, we have no way of protecting the people of this world. Kath doesn't really care. Apparently, his new king too shows a lot of promise. But I am going above and beyond to bring you into this world, so that you can turn my forces into an army capable of fighting a war. She locked her gaze with Naruto's own, her sight so keen it felt like it was boring a hole into his soul. You, Naruto Uzumaki, are, simply put, my insurance policy. Naruto stayed silent for a moment. He had merely one last question left to ask, and in his mind, it was the most poignant one. Why me? He voiced, his tone quavering, barely above a whisper. He asked the question, sure, but his mind already knew this answer. He needed to hear it. He had just come from one hellish war, and he was just about to be flung into another. The knowledge that there were powers beyond his understanding that dictated the condition with said wars did not give him much reassurance either. I chose you because you are, well, you, the woman nonchalantly answered. You are tenacious, fierce, powerful and now, experienced. Most of all, you are borderline impossible to truly hate. You make friends faster than anyone I know. And you can redeem people that all others have lost hope in. That is why I chose you, Naruto Uzumaki. You are a man who defies fate. I need you on my side, she answered, her gaze still as strong as ever. No longer a boring desk jockey. Now a Madonna who could lead armies of countless worlds to a hopeless battle in high spirits. It was then that Naruto realized that the creature in front of him, no matter all her shortcomings as an omnipotent being, did truly care. She didn't bring him in because she wanted to win this. No, she could definitely have found someone stronger, someone who wouldn't have needed such a sacrifice to bring into this world. By bringing him here specifically, she had allowed Kath to gain a huge lead on her. She didn't care about the game like her companion seemed to. With that in mind, maybe it wouldn't be too bad working with her. I believe it is time for you to go now, she stated. You will remember all of this, that is my parting gift to you. You will also gain powers that are localized to this world. And I suggest using them unless you truly need to call upon the power of chakra. She then raised her staff. I am taking a huge risk by placing you in this world. Kath has no idea that we are currently having this conversation, or that you are aware of the world I'm sending you into. Hence, I'd recommend not drawing his attention till it is absolutely necessary. Naruto merely nodded as a multicolored beam shot from the staff the woman held. My name is Framp. I thought you should know, she stated with a smile. Naruto responded with a bright one of his own as his body started to fade. It was then that he realized that his body wasn't just fading. It was shrinking. He was rapidly losing the physical strength that he had gained through endless practice. He was de-aging. The smile on Framp's face gained a comedic quality to itself as she noticed the changes occur. Naruto looked at her, bewildered, as his vocal cords devolved to a point where he was unable to hold a coherent conversation. The only thing that stayed was his expression of abject betrayal. The wonder of childbirth is a glorious thing, Naruto. And now, you get to experience it again. First-hand and lucid. Demons, creatures of immense power that devils simply could not match. History spoke of a time when demons were abundant. When legions of thousands flew on wings of darkness, locked in a perpetual war against the creations of light. Each and every one of them possessed powers that made even the Longinus pale in comparison. The end of the First Great War was hard on them. Demons were limited in number, after all. And he who sat on his radiant throne in heaven held the very power of creation. He could create an unlimited number of angels. And no matter how powerful the demons were, they were whittled down by endless armies of white. In the end, demonkind was eradicated. But they left their legacy behind. Devils, creatures of lesser evil, but with the power to adapt and survive, who took charge of becoming what their progenitors could not. These devils carried on the Great War, even though they were a new faction altogether. They were slated to die, crushed by the massive hordes of heaven. But luck shone on them, and another faction was born. One formed by angels themselves. Dissent in their ranks caused chaos, and many an angel found itself cast from heaven, wings darkened by heresy. These blighted angels formed yet another faction, comparable to that of devilkind. And under the leadership of the crafty Grigori, christened themselves as the Fallen. Thus ensued a three-sided war. A war that went on for centuries. In the first quadrant of the war, the angels held firm. They dealt massive blows to both the Fallen and the devils. Such was the war that waged between the three factions. For every angel they felled, 5 more would take its place. What more, the archangels, resplendent in their glory, took the field of battle by storm. They were creatures born to fight demons on equal footing, and to pair them up against weaker adversaries just led to indiscriminate slaughter. Many victories were earned this way, with devils and fallen quelled mercilessly by the radiant blades of God's greatest creations. Till one day, out of the blue, things change. The balance shifted, so to speak, and the only indication of that happening was the sudden increase in the ranks of the fallen. The next times the forces clashed, the status quo had changed. Angels were no longer the radiant, indomitable force they once embodied. They fell to devils and fallen, and none rose to replace them. Archangels, creatures that once embodied true might, fell to their equals on the other side of battle. The Grigori charged through fields of battle, now able to take the fight to their erstwhile brethren. And the devils bred. They bred at speeds that could give humans a run for their money. A new breed of devil was created by the mixing of bloodlines. Super devils, they were called, lauded as beyond even demons by some, and 4 of them convened to lead their separated armies as one. They were led by Rizavam Levon Lucifer, the prodigal son of the original Lucifer Morningstar and the demon mother Lilith. With his faithful followers and his co-leaders, he too made the field of battle his home. But it was apparent that at this pace, the 3 factions would only end this war when none of them survived. To end this, one side needed a trump card. And today, the devils were fated to get theirs. The signs are right, the stars read true. It is just as that magician claimed. Today, a demon will be born. Stronger than the dragons themselves, Croisery Asmodeus stated. The Satan faction had been waiting for this day for over 100 years, ever since the early days of the war. The original Crimson King, a human sorcerer with no par, had decreed that there would come a day where the boundaries between the dimensional gap and the worlds would weaken. A child would be born that day, a devil child, who would be much more than just a simple devil. Harnessing the power of the true demons of old, this child would be the first demon born in over half a millennium. And today was the day. The seepage from the world beyond the rim was at an all-time high, and the demonic obelisks were unable to keep the eldritch energies at bay, and devilkind felt its effects. Even though the seepage was too tiny to be a threat, magicians had been out applying purging spell shields around the abodes of the devils from the greater families. Little did the houses know, the magicians served a secondary purpose. Demons bred at an expedited rate, and there was quite a bit of bad blood between the families that were part of the 72 pillars. Childbirth was something they hid with utmost secrecy. And usually, the 4 great Satans let this breach in decorum be forgiven. After all, the children born to the families from the 72 pillars were powerful, and would soon be unveiled on the field of battle, young and full of promise. But today, the need for knowledge was dire. And the magicians would make sure that any child born today would be reported. The future of devilkind hung in the balance, hence, the need for them to obtain that child was imperative. The child will be identified by the end of the night, Rizavam Lucifer stated, taking a swig of wine from the glass he held. What concerns me is how to deal with the child. By all means, a demon is higher up the food chain than us devils. And if we forcefully take the child away from its house, we could face a rebellion the likes of which the devil world has never seen before. Katira Leviathan, mistress of water, nodded in confirmation. We'll have to treat the child with both respect and caution. We'll give it gifts, servants and powerful child devils from the extra houses. We'll call on houses Lucifuge and Abaddon, they too were expecting to have children. We'll give the child's family more of a say in how we do things, that should be enough to guarantee their loyalty. Shalba Beelzebub grunted in affirmation. We buy the parents, and we spoil the child. Typical. I hope this demon is worth it, though, he concluded, voicing the doubt that was on the minds of all 4 of the Satans. Some of the older devils remembered the demons. They remembered the chaos that a single one of them could weave. By all accounts, such power was terrifying. If the 4 Satans failed to muzzle the beast before it grew its fangs, they'd pay heavily for it. But devils were creatures that worshipped power. They were drawn to it like moths to light. And hence, their course was already decided. As they sat on their thrones, content in their plan of action, the doors to their antechamber opened, and in rushed a group of magicians. Their leader was a nameless devil from one of the extra houses, but the details didn't matter. What mattered was the news he had brought. My lord, he spoke. The Phoenix clan have delivered. It is a girl who wields the long-lost black flames. If the 4 Satans were shocked, they did not show it. Lucifer simply beckoned to his assistant, a young, female devil from House Citri. Lena, contact the Phoenix. Tell them that their child will now be under the direct supervision and training of the 4 Satans. Also, tell them that the firstborns of Lucifuge and the Abaddon will serve the child as her personal retainers." Lucifer then paused for a second. "Oh, and tell the current Phoenix head that we're organizing a private party for the heads of the 72 pillars to celebrate the birth of his child, the true demon." He added the last part dully, almost as an afterthought, no real emotion going into it. The assistant nodded before using her magic to teleport off. As she left, the last thing she saw was a victorious smile on her lord's face. It was in all this hubbub that another child was born. On the outskirts of the underworld, in an old, dilapidated castle, the wife of Neuer Abaddon, Sheila, was giving birth. And unknown to her, the child inside her womb was very much aware of what the hell was going on, and was certainly not pleased at the person who had left him in such a state. As the child was delivered, he started to wail, his vocal cords still unable to form coherent words. "He has a powerful voice, my love," Neuer commented. Sheila looked at her child, finding it hard to concentrate due to her drowsiness. "He's beautiful," she said. And the child was, quite beautiful. A blonde, blue-eyed boy, showing the best traits of both his Abaddon father and Belphegor mother. Sheila smiled and looked up at her husband, the love of her life. "Dear, do you have a name that we can call him? I believe it should be the man of the house who gets the last say in such matters." Neuer's smile dropped as he racked his mind for names that could embody the sheer amount of pride that he felt. Almost unbidden, one singular name came to his mind. It wasn't a word he had ever heard of, but for some reason, he knew the meaning behind it. Maelstrom, or as the Easterners called it, Naruto. "We'll name him Naruto. Naruto Abaddon." And if baby Naruto could have rolled his eyes, he'd have done so. As he was still trying to come to terms with his current predicament, Neuer handed him over to his mother, and looking up at her beautiful face, he realized why Neuer had done so. "Who's a hungry little boy?" Sheila playfully commented, ignoring how tired she was, as a shadow fell over baby Naruto's face. As he realized that he was being fed, he tried to exhume another choice string of expletives which, of course, came across as nothing but a garbled cry. His childhood did not look like it would be a good experience. "Are you nervous, son?" Naruto looked up to see the unchanging, forever youthful face of his new father. It had been 16 years since he was born, and even if he hadn't already been informed about the fact that he was born into a society of devils, he would have easily noticed that his parents just didn't seem to age. Also, learning that they were hundreds of years old also told Naruto that the same detention of age would face him once he too passed his prime. And the answer to his father's question was, of course, no. Naruto had faced much tougher opponents than the Phoenix Lord that was currently greeting the Lucifuge family head a few yards away from him. He had faced those opponents and persevered. A mangy bird with the powers of regeneration did not even faze him. After all, each and every power had a limit. Notwithstanding, he had a reputation to maintain. He was a member of a family hailing from the extra houses. As such, he was expected to have a healthy amount of fear and respect for the members of the 72 pillars. Hence, he nodded. Sadly, his father picked up on his emotional state and chuckled. "That was a good display, Naruto. The head of the Phoenix family isn't the most powerful or impressive devil out there, but he's not the reason you're here." "I'm here because of the contract, right?" he countered. "The one that basically gives us up to the Phoenix firstborn, like slaves." Neuer was surprised again by how astute his child was. Of course, he had no way of knowing that Naruto's ideals and knowledge came from his last life. He chuckled once again. "Think of it as an easy way to climb the political ladder. The child you will be serving is the reason the Phoenix enjoy the exalted power they currently possess." Naruto sighed. "The true demon, right? If she's anything like her father, it will be quite disappointing." Neuer locked his gaze with his son's, trepidation apparent in his amber orbs. "Do not underestimate the demon, Naruto. You are strong. Our power runs through you. The whole is a power that took me 30 years to master, you did it in 12. You might be a prodigy, but the demon too is one." Naruto could see the concern his father felt. 16 years, this man had raised him, sheltered him and loved him. Now that it was time for him to let go, his father couldn't protect him from the machinations of the Satans. And Naruto was more than okay with proving that he wouldn't need to. "Ah, Neuer, how are you?" Lord Phoenix greeted his father. "Persevering, as we are oft known to do. Lord Phoenix, his father commented, faked reverence apparent in his voice. The Lord then took note of Naruto, a quizzical look appearing on his face. This, I presume, is your son. What is your name, child? Not breaching decorum, Naruto bowed. Naruto Abaddon, at your service, Lord. He greeted. Unlike his father, though, his movements and voice were ever so slightly stiff, a fact that the centuries-old Phoenix patriarch caught on to. Ah, seems your kid has some spunk. Youth, such a brilliant time. When anything you do is never truly beyond reproach, he stated, the mirth in his voice surprising the shinobi turned devil. Apparently, the Lord was comparatively much more easygoing than most of the other royals he had met. A genuine smile came to his face. Maybe working under him wouldn't be quite as harsh a fate as he imagined it being. Excuse him, Lord, it seems his mother and I have spoiled him a bit, his father said, covering for his transgression. Lord Phoenix didn't seem to mind all that much, though. He can't hide his feelings, seems to have a sense of pride, and looks pretty strong. I believe those are good qualities in any devil, birth being irrelevant. Lord Phoenix then started to move off, beckoning Naruto to follow. As the two entered the building, Naruto felt his father's telltale demonic signature vanish. From here onwards, he was on his own. Well, him and the Lucifuge girl following him. And boy, the girl was a looker. Silver hair and eyes to match, possessing an aristocratic look that wouldn't be foreign on a woman of royal birth. Her skin was alabaster, and overall, she exuded this feeling of untouchability. She was strong, make no mistake. Much stronger than almost any devil Naruto had grown up with, sans his parents and others who'd fought in the Great War. He would estimate that as she was currently, she'd be a low ultimate class devil. But her power lay in subtlety. Unless her opponent could read her like he could, he or she would be in for a surprise of a lifetime. As such, Naruto took the chance to introduce himself to his newest peer. Hello, I'm Naruto Abaddon. And you'd be? The girl looked at him, taking a second to size him up. If she noticed anything impressive, she didn't show it. Which either proved that Naruto truly was good at suppressing the obscene amount of power he possessed, or that the woman was extremely good at hiding her emotions. I'm Graphia Lucifuge. Please take care of me, she stated in a chilly, professional tone. Naruto sighed. If he was to work with her, he'd have to get through the shell she had around herself. That could take ages, and that would take effort. Still, it was something he looked forward to. The company of three then came to an open arena. The fact that such a large structure was housed inside the Phoenix estate showed Naruto the difference between the 72 pillars and the extra houses. All the Abaddons had was a rickety, old castle. He could see the same look of wonder as he had on his companion's face. Comparatively to the Abaddon and the Lucifuge household, most other families had much less. The fact that this disparity existed did not go unnoticed by the blonde Abaddon. More interesting than the arena itself, though, was the person who was currently using the arena. Misshapen forms of monsters lay burnt and charred around the periphery of one young, black-haired girl, who for some reason, gave Naruto serious Uchiha vibes. Other monstrosities stepped over their forebears as they circled the girl. On closer inspection, Naruto could see that even though the girl looked a bit winded, there wasn't a single scratch on her beautiful, immaculate visage. He could swear that there was some genetic imbalance that allowed devil women to all be beautiful and, for lack of a better word, bountiful. As the monstrosities leapt at her, wings of black fire shot out of her back, surprising Naruto for a singular instant. He made to compare these black flames to those of Amaterasu, but the comparison fell short. While dangerous, the black fire that the Phoenix used could not compare to the god-smiting hellfire of the Uchihas. But the fire was still potent, as it ripped through the monstrosities without even a shred of resistance, transforming bones and flesh into ash and smoke. Naruto had to admit, he was impressed, though very little. As the girl faced off against her final opponent, a beast larger than the others, she noticed her father at the entrance of the arena. In order to make a show, she flew out of the path of her enemy as it charged. She then stayed in the air, right behind the creature, who had now found new targets. Naruto smirked. She's testing us. As he stated the obvious, the monstrosity charged towards him and Graphia. The Phoenix Lord behind them noticed how Naruto's body tensed up in anticipation, similar to that of a man who was used to mortal combat, and relished every single moment of it. The creature then leapt, closing the distance between itself and its new targets. Graphia was the first to react. Naruto's doubt was confirmed when a giant block of ice erupted from the ground, forcing the creature to slam into it mid-leap. Naruto followed up by jumping high, surprising his peer with the sheer amount of physical force such an action would require. He then locked his gaze on his target, which was currently struggling to regain footing. Naruto grinned, as he remembered the flare his friend and his mentor had used this certain skill with. Naruto used a devil sigil to shoot down, his foot aimed directly at the creature's head. As he connected, he felt the creature's armor crack, he felt his leg meet and pass through pliable flesh, almost like passing through wet paper. As he finally landed, he smirked. Dynamic entry. You too, you're strong. I wasn't expecting you to be able to take down that creature without my intervention. The Phoenix heir spoke as she walked up to the two devils that would now be under her command. The smirk on her face was ecstatic, and served quite well to place ease all comparisons Naruto could make between her and the Uchihas. Hell, no Uchiha could emote half as well as his master was currently doing. My name is Arya, Arya Phoenix. The girl pushed a stray length of hair out of her eyes. I don't care who you are, but I care if you're strong enough to stay alive. From today onwards, you will be working under me. As such, your only job is to support me on my jobs. I hope you too will be able to do the needful. For your sake, purely because if your efforts are subpar, you'll be replaced, the Satans and their contracts be damned. Naruto and Graphia nodded in unison. The former intrigued by the confidence the Phoenix exuded, even without any prior true combat experience. And the latter instantly enamored by the professional attitude her new superior embodied. Satisfied with the response, the Phoenix member turned to retreat from the arena, beckoning her new followers to come with her. Oh, and by the way, welcome to the strongest team the underworld has seen in centuries. Of all the missions we could have possibly gotten, why have we been sent to the human world? Naruto spared a second to look at Arya. 30 years had passed since they became a team. 30 years of painstakingly being the glue that held together his team, and he still couldn't understand why Arya hated the human world. Over the course of them being a team, they had completed more missions than any other team on record. With their varied powers and skills, no mission was ever too hard for them. Which is why it was coming as no surprise that the three of them were now only contracted for missions that were nigh on impossible for other teams to do. Which was partly why they found themselves currently in Greece, a country which, under great leadership, was proving to be the most dominant nation in the world. By leadership, Naruto meant sacred gears. It had taken the blonde shinobi a while to grasp the concept of these sacred gears. Relics bound to humans by God, still weird to know there was a guy who had the capital G and all that, but he digressed. That provided them a means to defend themselves against the occult. In theory, it was easy to understand, but considering the fact that these were weapons that could kill gods, he figured there was a secondary reason for their existence as well. Though the entire concept of a human taking on a god amused him a bit. Who would be that suicidal, after all? If the Jubi still had a will, he was sure it would be laughing inside him right now. Gremory and his team were severely injured in this area. They reported that the forces here could cause a hitch in our plans. We're here for preemptive defense. Consider it a holiday, guys, Naruto commented, lying down on a rock and choosing to ignore his teammates in favor of looking at the setting sun. Arya sighed. Gremory and his three mooks are merely inept. It wouldn't take much to send them scurrying away in fear. Could be a single angel for all we know. Behind them, Graphia made a disappointed sound. They aren't that bad, Arya. They did give us quite a fight during our ultimate class tournament match. Naruto sighed. Doesn't change the fact that they would have lost, had the examiner let us go on. None of us truly went all out in the fight. Searsex was constantly using his true form, while the rest too were going all out already, stalling for him. Arya didn't even use her flames, and I didn't even have to use the whole. Graphia sighed. Well, it isn't their fault that the two of you are monsters. Naruto chuckled. The only monster on our team is our resident demon. I'm just a simple medic, he concluded, earning a blank stare from both his teammates. You might be a medic, Arya started. But not many medics can punch an archangel 6 ways to Sunday. I think Raphael got a little cranky when my flames proved to be greater than his, but I wasn't the one who punched Raziel through a mountain. Naruto groaned. Don't remind me of that guy, he was too mysterious for his own good. Kept going on about how I wouldn't understand half the stuff that went on in his mind. Arya just shrugged. I feel his pain. You are a great dumbass after all. Naruto let the comment pass, but noticed how Grafia chuckled. It was good for her, being herself once in a while. It took Naruto the better part of a decade to get her to break character, and even now, she'd go back to being what society expected her to be all the time. Well, look who's laughing. Mind sharing the joke with little old me? Naruto commented, making Grafia choke on air. Arya, not one to miss an opportunity, pressed where it hurt. Bet she's thinking of Seer's ex right now. Tell me again, what is it about him that you find cute exactly? 'Cause I still cannot see it. Naruto butted in again, seeing his opening. Mo, you find that dullard cuter than me? My, I should dump you for that, Grafia-chan. A dark shadow passed over Arya's face. Naruto had forgotten that she did not like it when Naruto brought up his relationship with Grafia when they were working. Said something about it breaking professional decorum. So, Naruto decided to shut up. Grafia, having gotten the point, concluded her answer as fast as she could. Definitely not cuter than you, Naruto. And I didn't ever call him cute, I just said that I found the passion he had behind his entire equality speech during the examinations quite admirable. That is all. Arya cleared her throat loudly, getting their attention. So, the scouts state that Gremory's little gang were last seen along the northern ridge of Mount Parnassus. The mortals in the area too have reported occult phenomena along said region. As of now, we will split up and search the mountain for the perpetrators. When you find them, report to me. Our communication glyphs will be active till the end of the mission. Do not engage alone. Now, go. Naruto nodded as he summoned his wings. His companions followed suit. They flew up, gaining altitude over the mountain. As they reached the peak, it became increasingly apparent that whatever had taken out Gremory's group had in fact been much more powerful than any stray angel. Because the top of the mountain was ravaged, completely obliterated from the face of the earth. Oh, so it is one of those days. Longinus. Of all the blasted things it could have been, it's the Longinus. Two of them. While Naruto could definitely sympathize with the frustration his master felt, he felt his role was better served by thinking of a way to resolve the bloody mess that they had gotten into. The two Longinus in question were the Divine Dividing and the Boosted Gear. Locked again in endless battle against each other. And oh, what a battle it was. They had been fighting for the entirety of 2 days or more, considering Gremory's clique had gotten here around that time frame. Their weapons were battered, and even their balance breakers were beginning to crack. Most of all, their surroundings were what painted a better picture of their battleground reflecting this, or the lack thereof. The mountain peak had been decimated to the point where the two dragon wielders were now fighting inside a crater of their own making. If they had noticed them, they didn't show it. So engrossed with each other were they that their surroundings simply didn't matter. Such was their hatred for one another, such was a rivalry that transcended past multiple lifetimes. They haven't noticed us yet. We might be able to call for backup. Possibly get a Satan to help us out, Grafia added. While it was true that the three of them had yet to be discovered, exiting their current hiding spot would increase the chances of that happening manifold. It was a risk, yes, but so was fighting them. If push came to shove, Naruto was more than sure he could take them down, dragon and all. But he didn't wish to reveal the extent of his power. We should fight them. There are two of them, and they have obviously been at this for a while now. They are weak, we are strong. There is no need to involve the Satans, Arya stated. Grafia gave her a disapproving stare. Weakened they might be, but they are still dragons. I don't think it is a good idea for us to engage them, period. As the two bickered on, Naruto noticed the warriors stop fighting. In unison, their armored heads turned towards the group of three devils. Guys, I don't think we get to choose any longer. Naruto stated, pointing towards the two warriors, who were now aiming their cannons at their motley group. Arya was the first to react, her wings of fire already extended in anticipation. Team, scatter and engage, she yelled as she dodged the two blasts of obscene power that headed her way. She then maneuvered mid-flight and delivered a blast of fire to the white warrior. Naruto meanwhile, accelerated straight into the Red Knight, who swung his sword, seemingly an extension of the boosted gear, possibly some form of a subspecies balance breaker, in response. The sword was trapped mid-swing by Graphia's ice, allowing Naruto to punch the Red Knight into the mountain. Having distanced themselves, both sides regrouped. "You survived our initial barrage. Impressive, for devils," the White Knight spoke, ephemeral blue motes of power dispersing from the ethereal wings on his back. The Red Knight dislodged from the mountain and flew up, joining his white rival. "Indeed, you are better than the last four. They weren't even worth killing." Arya smirked. "If you are trying to compare us to Gremory and his flunkies, you're making a very wrong comparison. We're leagues above those buffoons." She chuckled. "Do give me your names before you keel over and die, though. I like to know who my victims are." Behind her, Naruto sighed. Leave it to Arya to taunt opponents that could kill her twice over before she could so much as blink. The two knights took her impending threat as something of a joke, as was made apparent by their laughs. "Sure, princess. My name is Davian, scion of the Great Welsh," the red-scaled knight proclaimed, bashing his sword on his cannon. His companion, though, was a lot subtler in his retort. "I have no name, but you may call me Aspro." Arya's smile grew wider. "I am Arya Phoenix, true demon of the underworld. Now, do me a favor and try to put up a good fig." Arya's taunt was cut midway when Aspro flew at her with speed that she couldn't hope to match. She was barely able to avoid his sword as it pierced the air where her head was a second ago. She lashed out with a kick, only to be blocked by the knight's seemingly impervious armor. Naruto moved to intercept, but was forced to defend against Davian, who moved in between him and Arya at speeds rivaling his eternal nemesis. "Now, it wouldn't be sporting if I allowed their fight to be interrupted, so why don't you fight me instead?" The Dragon Knight spoke as he lashed out at Naruto with his sword. Naruto easily dodged it and planted another fist on the knight's face. This time, though, the knight wasn't flung quite as far as he was last time. "The same tactic won't work against me twice," he stated. Naruto then felt the knight's already immense power double. "You'll have to do much more than that to take me down." Before Naruto could react, the knight was behind him, his charged arm cannon pointed right at Graphia. Naruto reinforced his wings with chakra, intercepting the blow. Sadly, he couldn't completely block out the explosion. As a result, Graphia was knocked away, unconscious, and Naruto was sent spiraling off the mountain. Arya saw this and grimaced. The knight fighting her was the wielder of the divine dividing, and he knew how to use it. Every time they two connected, she felt her power dip by half. The Phoenix regeneration was keeping her in the fight, but it was almost impossible for her to gain any distance from her quarry. She had to do something, and fast. "Is this much fight enough for you, princess?" Aspro commented as he lashed out with his sword again. Arya found herself eating her own words as the sword nicked her stomach, having her power again. The only way she could win here is if she used the one attack that reinforced her belief that she truly was a demon and not just a devil. She sent a giant blast of fire at her opponent. It served its purpose, as the knight chose to disengage. She then willed all her fire into existence, surrounding herself in a giant ball of black fire, the all-consuming light of which blotted out the dull orange rays cast by the setting sun. Witness the true power of a demon. Supernova. The ball of fire then began to expand outwards, destroying every single thing in its reach. Rocks melted under the sheer heat of what amounted to a small star. The dragons raised their arms in defense, incapable of escaping the rapidly expanding ball of doom. And for a second, there was silence. Then, the ball of fire dispersed, the flames burning out, running out of demonic energy to feed their existence. And Arya dropped to the ground, unconscious. Before she hit the magma underneath her, Naruto appeared in a burst of speed, catching her unconscious body. She'd be alright in 30 minutes, thanks to the regeneration factor of the Phoenix. Naruto would have transported her back to the foothills, like he did to Graphia. But currently, he had bigger issues. As the light from the supernova faded, Naruto realized that in their last bid for survival, the two knights gave up their bodies to their tenants. In the crater now stood two dragons, each resplendent in their own bodies. Each capable of destroying the very mountain they stood on, and each staring at the devil responsible for their current predicament. "That stung," the dragon who was once Davian commented. Contrary to what he said, his scales weren't even charred by the flames, seemingly unaffected in the slightest. "Who knew that the little bird held such power?" his rival chimed in, spreading his wings. Still, now that our pesky hosts are out of the way, we can fight with our true capabilities, the dragon, Albion commented. The other dragon, though, seemed to have eyes only for the phoenix who had cost him his mortal host, his current form nothing more than a transitory mask, as no human body could hope to withstand the full, unfiltered power of a dragon inside of them. Be that as it may, I cannot continue our fight till I know that nothing else will interrupt it. I believe we'd be best served by removing that pesky bird from this mortal plane. Naruto chuckled. I'm afraid I cannot let you do that. It would reflect poorly on me as her retainer if I allowed her to fall prey to two overcooked wyverns. The red dragon, Diedrich, chuckled. Even in the face of death, you find the time to crack a joke, he started. But what can you do? Your master is indisposed, and your other companion might as well just die, for all she's worth. Naruto let out a laugh, confusing the two dragons. Their confusion only grew when one of the boy's eyes morphed into a red ripple, commas dotting it. You two are dragons, that might be true. But you were enslaved, forced into prisons of iron, and left to rot, he stated, angering the duo he currently faced. Now, let me remind you of something you seem to have forgotten in your delusions of omnipotence. Chibaku Tensei, planetary devastation. The two dragons were instantly surrounded by an endless barrage of rocks. The two heavenly dragons were lifted up, their bodies crushed by countless amounts of molten rock that together formed a gigantic, cohesive sphere. As the planetoid was lifted above the mountain, all that protruded from the giant planetoid were the heads of the two dragons, bewildered and, for once, afraid. Because the devil who they thought of as worthless now stood beneath them, a gigantic, ethereal monster with 10 tails surrounding his body. And where the thing's mouth should have been, a gigantic orb of darkness was forming. So great was the orb's power, it was hard to even look at it, their instincts screaming at them to run, that their fate was sealed the moment it touched them. As the orb stopped growing, the blonde devil smirked. Let me remind you what fear is. Bijudama. That night, the true demon of the underworld was welcomed back by the Satans themselves. The story that she had single-handedly taken down two dragons with one attack was spreading through the masses like wildfire. The confused Phoenix was informed by her partner and medic that the dragons perished in her flames, consumed by the supernova. Something she was reluctant to believe, but was forced on her due to lack of evidence that proved otherwise. That night, there was a great celebration in the underworld. As the true demon had triumphed over the heavenly duo, the title of Dragonslayer would precede her name forevermore. And there was nothing she could do about it. Her retainers too were praised, to have been able to fight against the dragons alongside her, even though they were both incapacitated early on. And that night, a young reincarnated shinobi slipped away from the party, his secret safe with him. 200 years. 2 centuries had passed since the fateful day Naruto was reincarnated in the underworld. The first century had been comparatively simple, if not overly exciting. Graphia and Arya had spent the entirety of their first century taking an active part in the war of the three factions. They had proved that they had no equal on the field of battle. Numerous were their victories and their losses were none. Their prowess on the field of battle had earned them both accolades and status. And with the public being acutely aware of their power, they had become 3 of the most known faces in the underworld. The dragon-slaying demon, Arya Phoenix. The Ice Queen, Graphia Lucifuge. And the smiling face of death, Naruto Abaddon. Naruto still found it weird how even his position as a medic still didn't change people's perception of who he was. After all, he had fought off many strong foes during his time on the field. But both he and Graphia paled in comparison to the popularity Arya had received. The 4 Satans took every chance possible to shower her with praise and adoration, and she basked in it. She was a household name in the underworld, and had rejected hundreds of suitors from multiple great families. She was what every devil aimed to be. And for her, it was glorious. As such, Naruto didn't care about fame. And that paid off as the 2nd century of his life took a turn for the worse. The war was coming to an end, as was apparent to see. The forces of heaven and those of the fallen could no longer support an all-out war. Archangels and Grigori had fallen in battle, and there was no way to replace them. Heaven simply couldn't push on at the same pace as they once did. And less angels meant less fallen. On the other hand, devils were still reproducing, creating new soldiers bred for war, albeit not at a grand pace. Hence, the Satans made the push to keep the war going. Their goal was simple: to eradicate their timeless enemies once and for all. Sadly, even the devils had their limits. Taunting the fallen and the angelic host could lead to the two sides uniting against them. The underworld could not survive such a pincer attack. It was doubtful that even the demons could have, and the war, hence, promised mutually assured destruction. Devils, being creatures that valued power and survival over everything else, were divided between two factions. These factions were united by their primal instincts. One wanted to fight and attain more power for devilkind, while the second simply wished to survive. And hence, the underworld devolved into chaos. Devil killed devil in the city streets. The opposition, led by the houses Gremory, Cetri, Glacia Labelas and Astaroth, gained many supporters, thanks to the natural leadership skills that Searsex possessed. But for all their numbers, they lacked military prowess. On the other hand, the Satans had their pieces. They had ultimate devils by the dozen, and like a cherry on the metaphorical cake, they had the true demon and her two retainers, more alike a force of nature than anything. And hence, the two retainers were the ones sent to quell the largest groups of resistance. Arya was too powerful to be sent, considering someone needed to be ready to defend the Satans themselves, as if their own powers were not enough. Hence Naruto found himself embroiled in civil conflicts around the nation. Many a time, he had faced heads of the 72 pillars, only to leave them in a pool of their own blood. It wasn't something he enjoyed doing, sure, but it was his job. And the sooner it ended, the more grateful he'd be. He didn't care which side won. He had made his mind to leave either way. The moment this war ended, he'd leave for the dimensional gap. The nagging feeling in his head was growing. It had been growing over the last decade. And now, the means to get to the elusive dimensional plane were within his grasp. The power of the whole, which he had gained from his Abaddon heritage, had evolved. And it had opened up a new world of possibilities for him. Added to that, he had no ties left to the underworld. In order to be recognized by the Satans, devils from the extra houses had to cut all ties with their families. By ascending to the rank of an ultimate devil, Naruto had done so, as had Grafia. He was no longer accountable for his house, and his parents understood that. Even in gatherings, they no longer acknowledged his existence. That was the curse of being a member of an extra house. He had never made any real friends during his 200-year-long life. Devils were a secretive bunch, and their friendships were decreed by contacts and alliances more often than not. Arya didn't care where he was. She had her family and the Satans on her plate already. And his last reason for staying, Grafia, had broken up with him mere weeks ago. Which is why it came as quite a surprise when she asked him to meet her in a secluded location in the city's slums. Graya wasn't one to ask for favors. In the century and a half that he had been with her, not once had she asked for a single one. And now, merely a few weeks after having broken his heart, she had asked for her first. This vexed the blonde devil, and that led to him strolling down the slums that he was once brought up in. He only remembered some of the streets, but being 200 years old did that to even the best of memories. Things had changed, times had changed, people had risen from these streets, and people had drowned in their own blood in these streets. But he stayed constant. Naruto. This way. The blonde was broken out of reminiscence by his ex's stern voice. Looking around, he found the source of the sound a little further down the road, poking her head out of an abandoned house, resplendent in her beauty even with the disconcerted frown on her face. Naruto followed her lead into the house, tuning out her voice as she thanked him for coming to her aid. He steeled his heart. He was by no means okay with the proximity he currently held with the woman he had loved for so long. But she had asked for a favor, and he would grant it to her. "We need to hurry. Their condition is worsening," she exhumed, leading Naruto into what appeared to be a basement shelter. As his demonic eyes stabilized to the darkness, what he saw stunned him. The place Grafia had led her into was the medical chamber of the very foe they were currently fighting. And on the 3 beds lay the people who were spearheading this revolution. Seraphal Cetri, Akuja Glacia Labelas and Falbium Asmodeus. Beside them stood the heart of the revolution, Searsex Gremory himself. The 3 incapacitated devils were in bad shape. Their powers were being rapidly dispelled by the black goo that covered them, and Naruto knew where the goo came from. But that wasn't the question that came to his mind. Graphia, he begun, his voice filled with steel, cold as the ninth layer of hell. Why have you called me here? The silver-haired Lucifuge flinched at the tone. It wasn't something she had ever heard or seen Naruto use, but here he stood, unmistakable in his resplendent power and understandable confusion. She cleared her throat, shaking off the effect Naruto had on her. They faced Lord Barbados in battle. While they did take him down, they were struck by his attack. We cannot get the substance off them, and our healers can't do anything. I need you to help, she said, a slight, pleading tone accompanying her erstwhile formal request. Searsex, feeling the need to join in, walked up to the shinobi. Naruto, I know this is sudden, but you are possibly the only person who can help us here. Naruto locked his eyes with the Gremory air. You started this war, Gremory. You knew going in that there would be casualties. Yet, when faced with the death of your comrades, you come to the enemy for help. He drew a kunai at speeds that the red-haired devil couldn't even dream of being able to follow. Give me one reason not to strike you four down and end this war right now. Before the red-haired devil could respond, a wall of frost appeared between him and the blonde. Naruto jumped back, surprised by the sudden attack. He regained his bearings in record time as he drew his second kunai. Before he could respond, though, he caught sight of his assailant. Graphia, the woman he loved and cherished, now stood between him and the four seeds of rebellion, her arms defiantly channeling her potent ice magic. If they die, so do I, she stated, glaring at Naruto with defiant eyes. For a second, Naruto had the urge to respond in kind. But then his high faded and he realized who he was facing. You know that what you're doing is tantamount to treason? That you'll be killed if you are discovered? Naruto asked, his voice uncharacteristically concerned. Searsex stepped out from behind the wall of ice, his face hesitant, his gait heavy. Naruto, the redhead began. If the Saiyans win this war, it won't matter. We'll all die. He then walked over to the blonde Abaddon and handed him a scroll. That is a list of the families that have been eradicated by the wars. And this, Searsex handed him another scroll, is the list of devils that can reproduce. You should definitely read that one, your name is on it. Searsex then sat down next to his immobile comrades. Read them and see why for yourself. Intrigued, Naruto went over the scrolls. The revelation that the information held caught him by surprise. Only 40 of the 72 families remain, and only 70 notable devils can currently breed. These numbers are paltry compared to what the Saiyans revealed. Searsex nodded in response. We cannot continue our war with heaven, even given time. Our race is too broken to go to war. Searsex revealed. And yet, the Saiyans want to throw us back out there, spilling our blood to wage a war none of the three sides want. And if we, by some miracle, win, they plan to throw us against the humans. And you, of all people, know how dangerous humans can be when given the right tools. Naruto nodded, moving over to the three incapacitated devils. He could save them, but doing so would make him an accessory to treason. While he could easily escape the underworld, he didn't want to leave the people he cared for here to rot. Sacred gears, he stated. God's gift to mankind, weapons we are not well equipped to fight. Searsex nodded, trepidation easily visible on his face. So, will you help us, Naruto Abaddon? The blonde didn't respond verbally, instead, he summoned the green, healing chakra he had become known for using to great effect. If we plan to take down the Saiyans, we need to act fast, he commented, as smiles of relief spread on the faces of both his companions. Your companions will take a week to heal. Once the week is over, you must retreat from battle. I have seen how you fight, and trust me, you're not even in the same league as the Saiyans. He then pointed at Graphia. Take her with you, I will guard these three. Secure a place where you four can train. Once they are healed, I will relocate them there. And what do we do then? Searsex questioned. The Saiyans won't just sit quietly while we grow stronger. He was silenced by Naruto's raised hand. Graphia and I will create time for you, a year at max, 6 months minimum. I will personally oversee your training, make sure you can defeat the Saiyans. We strike at the end of next year. Searsex was flabbergasted. The man who was willing to take him down a mere minute ago was now offering to take on his comrades as pupils. You do all that for our revolution? He asked, again. His gaze was greeted by the unflinching cerulean of the man who he had just haphazardly drafted to his cause. I'm not doing this for your revolution, make no mistake. Naruto then gazed at Graphia, her lovely visage still doing unspeakable things to his mental state. I don't care who wins this war, I will fight in it and see it to the end, that is all I promised myself. I'm doing this because she asked me to. In for a penny, in for a pound, huh? Graphia commented, her rare, playful side shining through in her moment of happiness. Naruto too, chuckled dryly. Ah, a British proverb, how suitable. Now, move, we do not have a minute to waste. The next year was remarkable in devil history for two reasons. 1. The spearheads of the revolution, Gremory and his alliance, disappeared from the field of battle. They were replaced by the true demon's two retainers. Being members of the extra houses, they were taken as a joke. Their feats of combat were originally taken as byproducts of being on the same team as the true demon, and they were all but expected to keel over when faced by a devil from the families. That was their gravest mistake. Naruto and Graphia ripped through battlefields, both winning the revolutionary army's many battles that were considered unwinnable. Alone, each of them proved equal to an army. Together, they resembled a primordial force of nature. They kept the forces of the Satans at bay, and they did so in the most effective manner possible. By kidnapping the devils that lead those armies. Which lead to the second reason. Many such armies later chose to align themselves with the revolutionaries, their heads defecting to the other side of the field of battle. Searsex was a natural-born leader, and he was well versed in the dealings of the court, thanks to his upbringing as a Gremory. He cut deals where he could, took hostages where he could, and tortured whoever was left. Most devils broke at his feet, joining his army, be it for political gain, self-preservation, or plain old fear. All this time, as the war raged on, Naruto spent time with the four devils who had their eyes on the thrones that the Satans currently called their own. He trained them whenever he could, bringing out their potential, of which there was no lack. Powerful bloodlines bred powerful children, and these were the best of the best. He grew close to three, Seraphal, Falbium and Akuja. The first was childish but powerful. She held her morals above all, and would never abandon a teammate. She was instantly smitten with him, but would never show it, much to the dismay of her teammates. Akuja was a smart man, and Naruto, with his knowledge of war, was more than a match for him, on the training field and off. Falbium was lazy, a trait he shared with his current trainer. They would often talk when they both rested, gazing at the fake sky of the underworld and staring at fake clouds blow past. The one he couldn't bear was the Gremory. While he could understand that Searsex wasn't an evil man, he did not like the self-righteous posturing the devil was so fond of. His aristocratic, passive way of dealing with issues was anathema to the blonde devil, who preferred to solve his issues with a much more active approach. Still, the man held his ideal above all, and he could respect that. Apparently, that was what drew Graphia to his cause. 1 year, he had spent, repeatedly smiting the four devils to the ground, over and over again. Yet, they would always get up. And every time they did, they came at him stronger and smarter than before. Before long, he found himself using the power of the whole to fend them off, and at the end of the year, they were hitting hard enough for him to take them seriously. If anyone could do it, other than him, it would be them. Trained and rested, today was the day that they assaulted the Satan's seat of power, Castle Inferno. Their army was currently battling the main force directly under the Satans, the largest army of the underworld. It was all a ruse, as the 6 devils who truly mattered made their way directly to the castle. Are you sure we're ready for this, Naruto? Seraphal asked, her beautiful face set in a permanent frown. The blonde nodded. As ready as you'll ever be. You four, with Graphia, pose a serious threat to the Satans in there. Naruto pointed at the castle. I, meanwhile, will buy you the time necessary to take them down. Once the battle begins, I will be unable to provide you guys support, so everything that happens in there is up to you. Graphia cocked one eyebrow, slightly surprised. Why? Where will you be? She questioned, earning a chuckle from her ex. Naruto then looked up towards the sky. In our year of training, I believe you guys have forgotten that the Satans have one final line of defense. It took his companions a second to realize who he was talking about, and Seraphal was the first to respond, her mouth agape in abject terror. No, she exclaimed. Shit, how could we have forgotten? The demon guards the devils that dwell within. It was the only part of the revolution that we could never figure out a counter against. Her voice gained a pleading quality. Naruto, you can't. She's a demon, both literally and figuratively. But so is he. Grafia stepped forth. Naruto himself is a super devil only in name. I could hold her back, but not for long. Among us, he's the only one who can buy us the time needed to fulfill our objective. There was terror in her voice, but it was restrained, as much for her own sake as her companions. Sensing the tension, Naruto chuckled. It's okay, guys. I was on her team for the better part of a century. I have some tricks up my sleeves. I'll make sure to buy you enough time to complete your mission. His laugh was the final straw, as Seraphol began to cry. Searzek stepped forward as well, concern apparent on his face. What good is our victory then? If we lose you, we lose everything, he stated, making Naruto laugh again. Now, you're exaggerating things. You have a dream, an ideal. And I'm willing to take a dance with death, just to see it fulfilled. He lied, he had no intention of dying. And I told you once before, Gremory, you started this war knowing full well that there would be losses. Have the backbone to finish what you started. Plus, I'm not going to die here. I have a few things to do before I keel over. Searzek nodded. I'll keep you to that. Best of luck, he muttered before running off towards the castle, where his date with Destiny awaited. Grafia gave him a single nod, a grateful look on her face. Naruto expected nothing more. Akuja stopped for a second, offering his hand to Naruto. Confused, he shook the proffered hand, eliciting a smile on the gray-haired demon's face. That, he stated, is a bond of brotherhood. It promises your safe return. Don't you dare break it. Naruto smiled and nodded, choosing to remain silent. The devil then ran off after his friends. Falbium simply stared at Naruto, his blank look unfazed despite his current predicament. Don't die, he offhandedly commented. It would be too much work, arranging a funeral. Naruto chuckled. Duly noted. He responded, getting a nod out of the lazy devil, who then sauntered off after his comrades. Naruto, Seraphol began, her voice quivering. Please, live, that's all I ask. Please, promise me, just this once. Naruto paused for a second, genuinely touched by his fellow devil's sentiment. He had to remind himself again, as he found himself doing over the last 200 years, that these were devils, closer to humans than the monstrosities he had faced throughout his life. Uncharacteristically, he hugged her, bringing her close to him. I promise, Seraphol, that I will live. Seraphol, while initially surprised, broke down in his hug, clinging closer to the devil she had grown closer to in 1 year than any other. When you come back, we'll have a party. Once that is done, I have something to show you, Sarah quietly commented, breaking the hug and slowly walking off. A few yards away, she turned to get one final look at the person she had fallen in love with, before averting her eyes and dashing off. Well, that was a thing. You can come out now, Arya, Naruto stated. He knew she was there, she had been there from the very beginning. Listening, observing, biding her time. He knew why she let them go. She didn't care for the Satans. Through the entirety of the conversation, her eyes were only focused on him. As she stepped out of the shadows, he took a moment to size her up. She had definitely grown stronger, much stronger. She held around herself an aura of abject betrayal. But even surrounded by all that negativity, she was undeniably beautiful. What a sappy goodbye. Makes it hard to see why you would abandon me for them, she stated, bitter poison lacing her words. Naruto sighed, I do not abandon my friends, Arya. You are on the wrong side. The Satans will only cause the destruction of our race. Naruto would have explained the reasons why, but Arya wasn't in a mood to listen. I don't care about those old hoods. I care about the fact that both you and Grafia defected. You left me here, alone. They wouldn't let me defect, after all. I was their trump card. They took my family hostage, even my little brother. And then, they dared me to defect. She spoke, her volume rising in anger, the temperature increasing, tongues of flame randomly flickering into existence. Not once did you tell me your intentions. One day, I was cheerfully having lunch with you, and the next thing I know, you descend on the field of battle, slaughtering the devils you once fought for. Naruto grimaced. There was a reason for my actions, I would tell you, but you aren't willing to understand. A smile appeared on Arya's face. Not one of the genuine smiles that Naruto had once become so used to, but a feral, cold one. I got my explanations a long time ago, you lying filth. When were you going to tell me about the dragons? She shot back, surprising Naruto. She noticed his hesitation and chuckled. When you decided to betray me, I asked for permission to leave for training, she elaborated, tossing him a proverbial bone. I left this world, and headed to the human realm. There, I found dragons. 2 of them, and I fought them, over and over again. They were named Tannin and Tiamat, 2 dragons much lower on the food chain than the ones I, supposedly, killed. And let me tell you, dragons don't burn easily. They laughed at my fire, telling me that dragons were fire incarnate, just like his phoenix. Fire feeds them, it can never get through their scales. The dragons themselves wield flames that could then put my own to shame. She smiled again, this time, her smile was akin to that of a maniac. 1 year, I fought them, I traded fire against them. And by the end of it, I was barely able to force a draw. And you know what makes this worse? Both these dragons once faced losses against the 2 I killed, or should I say, you killed, oh true demon. Naruto didn't flinch. Arya was always perceptive, and he knew that one day, his secret would be revealed. She wasn't quite done yet, though. You were born on the same day as me, but no one cared. So mired were they, looking for the demons in houses of nobility, that they never considered that maybe, just maybe, they were looking in the wrong place after all. It doesn't matter though. Today, I will take you down, with the powers that I have earned. And all will be right with the world again. Naruto smirked, but there was no mirth behind the action. I do not wish to fight my first and best friend, Arya. But something tells me that if I don't, you'll go after Graphia. His eye morphed, red replacing cerulean in a flash of dulled light, darkness drawing closer to him, as if it were welcoming him. And that, I cannot allow. So come at me, Arya Phoenix. Show me your power, student of dragons. With pleasure. The black-haired false demon yelled as she charged at her erstwhile best friend. Why? Arya yelled as an unseen force broke her body yet again, propelling her through dozens of buildings and delivering her into the tarmac. Her regeneration kicked in instantly as she propelled herself off the pavement, which was duly destroyed by a fist, followed by the body of the man she had decided to fight. They had barely been fighting for a few seconds, yet her body had been incapacitated at least a dozen times. If not for her regeneration, she'd have been rendered unable to fight in the first few seconds of combat. To add insult to injury, Naruto wasn't even trying to kill her. He was only trying to take her out of the fight each and every time he appeared in front of her, with speed that she couldn't hope to match, his fist drawn to deliver a punch. She could see the pain and regret in his eyes. He didn't want to fight her, but her anger won't let her concede. Not that she had any chance. The Naruto she currently faced was possibly the greatest adversary she had ever gone up against. Even the combined might of the 2 celestial dragons paled in comparison to the sheer amount of power she could sense from her erstwhile friend. Why? She yelled again, firing a blast of fire that could damage even a dragon, shot with the intent of incinerating the one man who kept her sane, even with the pressure exuded by the Satans and her family mounting on her head. The blonde just casually swatted the flames aside, as if he were merely effortlessly gesturing and not touching flames which burned as bright as the sun. He locked eyes with her again, subjecting her to his emotions in the process. She closed her eyes, completely disregarding the punch that threatened her own well-being. Again, she found herself in pain, both mental and physical. She forced her body to straighten midair, her broken bones creaking in disagreement. As Naruto closed in, she prepared her final strike, feeding all her demonic energy to her flames. This attack was capable of forcing dragons to pause, and Naruto was, for all his strength, still just flesh and bones, no more metaphysical than her. Why can't I kill you? Her supernova engulfed the man she once called her best friend. The fires consumed all, destroying an entire city block. As the fires burned out, her vision went hazy. But even through her clouded vision, she could make out the blonde Abaddon's form, still unhurt. As she floated out of consciousness, her body fell. Her fall was cut short, though, as something caught her mid-fall. She made a conscious effort to stay awake, her vision clearing for a brief moment. She saw the man she had irrevocably fallen in love with, and she saw the tears in his eyes. I understand now, she whispered. I cannot kill you, because I love you. Once she had spoken the last syllable, she let unconsciousness take her. Naruto wiped his tears. All things considered, this was a better outcome than he expected. He could now understand why the Phoenix felt so betrayed. He cursed himself for not noticing the signs. Not noticing the pain that she must have felt, seeing him and Graphia together for centuries. His best friend had left him with some complex emotions. He could deal with devils, angels, even dragons. But such emotions? Not really his cup of tea. Devils and humans share many characteristics. In many ways, they are different. For example, a devil is born much more durable than a human will likely ever be in his or her life. A devil will live longer, far longer than any human. But then, there were similarities too. Most of these similarities manifested in the mind, rather than physically. One of these similarities was their mutual respect for tradition. As such, the 4 seeds of revolution were now to be crowned as the new Satans, each taking over where the last left off. Added to that was the fact that the 72 pillars, or whatever was left of them, would still retain the majority of their power. What more, they would now create a council of peers, one which could, and would influence the decisions of the new Satans. Meanwhile, in all the bureaucracy, the extra houses were yet again forgotten. More power to the powerful, none for the weak. Classic devil logic. While Naruto did not regret his choice, he did feel angry. The law that extra devils had to denounce their families in order to be recognized by the 72 pillars wasn't revoked. But now, extra devils did not need a sponsor or a master in order to take ascension exams. Which meant that extra devils could now work to get to the same level of social power that devils from greater families enjoyed from birth itself. How pathetic. But still, it was progress, and that was what mattered. Sitting here, away from the party, how typical. Naruto was brought out of his thoughts by the voice of his best friend. Apparently, a day was enough for her to heal off most of the damage he had caused her. Still, seeing the bandages around her waist did send a pang of guilt straight through his conscience. Arya noticed this and tutted disapprovingly. You did what you had to. I can't hate you for it. I came here to apologize, I was out of line. You didn't abandon me, I was just too stubborn to notice what was going on around me. Naruto shook his head. No, neither of us are to blame. The blame lies solely on the heads of the old Satans, and they got their just desserts. His response got a smile from his companion. That they did, she agreed. So, what's your plan now? Naruto thought for a second. For one, I have to figure out my emotions, thanks to you, he spoke, making the black-haired phoenix blush. I believe me and Graphia have to talk. Even after all this, I still do love her. He stopped, though, as a concerned look appeared on Arya's face. What? He asked, did I say something wrong? For a second, Arya went silent. Before Naruto could ask her what was wrong, she locked her gaze with his, fear and concern clearly visible in her gaze. Naruto, do you know why I left the party, even though I was technically a guest of honor? Confused, Naruto shook his head. The Phoenix continued. In the middle of the party, Circex left the podium. He walked over to Graphia, who is still not recognized as a member of the high-class society. She then choked, confusing Naruto even further. In front of the entire gathering, he asked her out. Arya continued, noticing the suspended horror on Naruto's face. And she said yes. The glass in Naruto's hand shattered, startling Arya and splashing whatever was left of his drink. That son of a bitch. Now he understood why Graphia was so protective of him, going as far as to betray her own faction to side with him. And in his folly, he had simply made her romance a reality. He now realized that she didn't break up with him because of her war duties. That notion had gone out of the window the moment he learned she defected. But because she had her eyes on another. And he had gone out of his way to make sure she and the man who stole her from him were safe during this pointless war. Oh, how naive, he should have noticed. Thinking back, he realized that throughout the 1 year that they were all together, her loving gaze was only meant for the new Lucifer. She used him, and it was very apparent that she got what she wanted. It made sense now, why she wanted him to face Arya. She couldn't bear to face her erstwhile rival in love when she herself was trampling on the heart of the man who, for the better part of 2 centuries, belonged solely to her. How cruel. Naruto laughed, his mind trying to comprehend why she would do such a thing. But then again, it was obvious. He wasn't enough for her. And maybe Circex was. A devil who would have died in a failed revolution was worth more to her than the man who, on countless occasions, saved her life. Pathetic. He commented, I'm being petty, but I don't know how to stop it. Luckily, he didn't have to. As 2 soft, feminine hands encircled him, pulling him closer. You don't have to bear this pain alone, Naruto, Arya spoke, shedding her own tears. It was so shocking that Naruto stopped for a second. Arya was a phoenix, and a phoenix's heart only wept for those they loved. It was then that Naruto realized how much he meant to her. How her heart wept for the broken person his love had left him. And in that moment, Naruto did something that he should have done a long time ago. He kissed her. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. What she did show was eagerness, as her hands went to places that were socially out of bounds. Naruto relaxed in her grasp, as she activated her teleportation glyph, taking them both back to her mansion. He was hers now, even though he wouldn't stay. At least, he was hers for the night. And she would make sure to savor every bit of it. Are you sure you have to leave? Naruto dressed in front of his lover, giving her a free show as he did. Last night had been eventful, to say the least. He hadn't made love with such passion since his first night with Graphia, all those years ago. And even though she lacked the experience his past lover possessed, she made up for it with her endless stamina. The Phoenix regeneration factor truly was a godsend when it came to one's life. And afterwards, Naruto had enough time to sort out his feelings as well. He couldn't let Graphia's choice get to him. And he couldn't let his newfound love keep him from his destiny, especially considering the fact that his destiny was literally nagging him in his head. As such, he had to leave, and he had no plans of returning. Sadly, his second chance at love would have to be a long-distance affair. No can do. I don't want to take the blame for breaking your back again, old woman, he joked, causing his lover to pout. He made the mistake of looking at her, in all her playful glory. The woman he had been around for almost all of his extremely expansive life. And the urge to stay rose up in his subconscious yet again. Thankfully, he was able to quell it, though it was by no means an enjoyable act. What about the others? Not going to say your goodbyes? She asked, gaining a blank look from the blonde Abaddon. Well, to be very honest? No. As of this moment, my parents haven't been allowed to even think of me as their son for almost 2 centuries. The people who I brought to victory, I couldn't care less about. And the woman I love, well, she already gets to say goodbye. Arya blushed again, but smiled through it. Well, they do know that you defeated me, all 5 of them. If you stay, they'll probably give you a position of power, she commented. Though as I say that, I am constantly reminded of how you've shunned the limelight all your life, Mr. Demon. Naruto chuckled. You understand me so well, don't you? He spoke, getting ready to call on his family's power. He was stopped, though, by 2 arms encircling him. Deciding that maybe he could stay for a few more minutes, he turned around to see the smiling face of the lover he should have chosen far earlier. Take this, she spoke, handing him a vial with a gold chain attached to it. Instantly, Naruto was stunned. In his hands was a vial of Phoenix tears. And he knew that they were her own. No Phoenix would part willingly with the tears of his or her comrades. No, this was her telling him that she truly loved him, and that those feelings were here to stay. Are you sure? He asked her. Considering who you are, I believe there will be hundreds of devils vying for these tears pretty soon. His response gained a beautiful, melodic laugh from his lover. Let them try, if they can't beat me, they can't have me. Consider it your prize for beating me fair and square. Naruto's smile then dropped. What about your family? Are you sure they're okay with you giving your tears to a low-born devil like me? He questioned, making Arya shake her head. I don't care what they think, honestly. I outranked them on both the social ladder and the power scale. They cannot choose the person I marry, or if I ever do marry, considering you're too preoccupied to be mine. She then giggled. And anyone who tries to lay claim on me has to prove himself to me. After all, a strong devil can have multiple consorts. She then locked eyes with him, a wistful expression spreading on her face. And something tells me that I'm probably not going to be the last woman who catches your fancy. Naruto scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Yeah, you probably don't have to worry about that. I'm not the most attractive person out there by a long shot. That line had an immediate effect on Arya, who looked at him with a blank stare, surprised by his cluelessness. Naruto, you might be a knucklehead at times, but other than that, you are kind, strong, and genuine, not to mention handsome. She then moved off, deciding to put on some clothes herself. All I ask is, even when you find someone else, or many such someones, don't forget about me. Naruto smiled. What did I do to deserve someone like you? He asked, only for a mischievous smile to appear on her face. Well, you ignored my feelings for the better part of 2 centuries. Maybe that? Naruto laughed, taking potshots already huh? But seriously. Thank you, Arya, for everything, he said sincerely, as the true power of the whole manifested in front of him, pulling him into the gap between dimensions. As he left, another stray tear leaked out of his lover's eyes. Barely been a second since he's gone and I already miss the idiot. The dimensional gap was just as he remembered it, but in his defense, it was a rather hard to forget kind of place. This time, though, he felt his demonic power unravel slightly as he passed into the dimension. Without Fram's power shielding him from its power, the dimensional pull threatened to tear him apart. But he was stronger than that. For the first time in centuries, Naruto entered his true sage mode, letting the power of the Jubi protect him as 10 truth-seeking spheres appeared behind him. His body stabilized, but he had definitely attracted attention. A fact that was made clear by the shadow above him, and the woman who had suddenly appeared next to him. "Who are you and what are you doing in my area?" the dragon above him roared, as it settled down whipping up a gigantic sandstorm as he did so. Naruto was actually forced to use wind manipulation to brace himself. The woman, if that was what she truly was, needed to do no such thing, as the dust simply seemed to avoid her lithe frame. Naruto sighed. Both, the woman and the dragon, were almost equal in power, and if push came to shove, it could take him months to take them down. And while time really wasn't an issue, he would rather spend the same time doing something constructive rather than fighting two creatures who apparently owned this dimension. Hence, he simply released his chakra. All of it. The effect was instant, as both the dragon and woman were forced to the ground, unable to move. Meanwhile, Naruto walked over to the tower which held his object of fascination, completely ignoring the dragon's bellows, insisting he come back and fight him like a man. The woman, though, did not take her eyes off his retreating figure even once. This devil was special, someone who could help her reclaim her dimension from her show-off of a rival. As Naruto entered the tower, he was greeted by the skeletons of creatures that couldn't possibly be human, or even anything close. Many of them had multiple arms, while some had tails. They looked like what you'd get if you crossbred the most ferocious animals you could find. As he climbed the tower, the number of corpses increased, till he reached the top, where the ground was completely covered with them. He ignored the crunch of breaking bones under his feet as he walked over to the item that called to him. It was a golden spear, unadorned, save for one straight line of red that ran through its length. There was nothing quite so remarkable about it, except for the simplistic beauty which underlay it and the faint pulse of power that emanated from it. Curious, he pulled the spear out of the ground. All of a sudden, the spear began to unravel, and he was assaulted by painful flashes of memories. Memories that showed him the earth before humanity laid claim to it. Memories of a war and a fight against a creature who looked and felt like a father. As these memories flashed through his head, the weapon's history was made clear to him. Wars had been waged for it, nations destroyed while defending it. It was, after all, creation willed into the shape of a weapon. As the memories faded, he smiled. The weapon that had assimilated into him had a history. And as it had a history, it had a name. Samsara. How quaint, he whispered, the spear taking shape in his hands as he called its name. Sadly, that was all. The nagging was now gone, but with its disappearance, there was nothing there to replace it. No sense of adventure, no prophecy, no call of destiny left. All that remained was him, and the two creatures that had recovered from his initial display of power. As they flew to the top of the tower, the woman having taken her true form, that of a black dragon. Naruto got ready for battle. After all, he had time to kill. I'm surprised you applied for this kind of job, Mr. Uzumaki. Considering your degrees and accolades, I believe you might be overqualified to serve as a mere student counselor. In the countless years he had spent exploring the vast reaches of the human plane, Naruto had been many things. He had been a warrior, an explorer, a doctor, a scientist, a bureaucrat and even a host, on multiple occasions. Truth be told, he was more than overqualified for any job a human could possibly have, period. He had been to more universities than he could count, devouring knowledge at unprecedented speeds, thanks to his shadow clone jutsu. But then again, one of the upsides of being a devil was that no matter what job you applied for, you could always look like it was your first. The power to change one's appearance was formidable indeed. Coupled with the seals that blocked his demonic signature, it was the perfect guise. So confident was he, that he was even taking up a job in a city that served as a stronghold for multiple devil houses in the human world. After all, it was his self-appointed job to watch over them. Out of sight, out of mind. I've always had an interest in pursuing teenage psychology. These are the formative years for children, and I believe the best way to learn how they form their worldview is to observe teenagers from as close as you possibly can. Hence, my choice, he answered. The school's headmaster, a balding man in his 50s, gave his papers another once over. But Naruto knew his ruse. The decision was not his to make. That honor belonged to the devils who owned this school. And right now, he knew that they had already come to a decision. The headmaster closed his file with a smile. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Uzumaki. I believe we'd be best served by having a man of your stature on board. Welcome to Kuo Academy. The man offered his hand, which Naruto shook post-haste. We'll just file your papers. You can start your work anytime you see fit next week. We'll be looking forward to hearing from you. Naruto nodded. Thank you. Now, I believe it is time for me to excuse myself, Naruto said, detecting a familiar energy signature outside the room. Shaking the headmaster's hand one last time and wishing him well, the blonde Uzumaki exited the room, almost running directly into a boy who seemed to be looking for a hiding place. Seeing his chance, he hid behind the tall and broad-shouldered blonde. Just as he did so, a horde of angry females ran past, not even sparing a second glance at the strange man in the hallway, their tunnel vision too strong. Phew, that was way too close, the boy exclaimed. Naruto's face paled as he felt the insatiable emotion of lust mixing with fear that the boy seemed to exude. So overpowering was his lecherous intent that the blonde devil almost couldn't believe that this boy was the holder of a Longinus. Specifically, the boosted gear. Well, they sure seem to have it out for you. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, by the way. The blonde offered the brown-haired kid his hand, which the boy promptly shook. Inside him, Naruto felt the dragon's energy shift, instinctively recoiling from his touch. Not noticing the subtle shift, the boy smiled back at the much taller blonde. Apparently, the boy wasn't even aware that one of this world's strongest existences currently dwelled inside him. Issei Hyodo. Nice to meet ya. The boy introduced himself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to make sure whether my friends are alive or not, the boy barked, running off in the direction he came from. Naruto chuckled. This would be an interesting year. Sona Shitori, a young girl trying to shoulder the responsibilities of the world, and as the only mature Seitree, Naruto could see why. The only reason he knew she was a Seitree, other than the distinct feel of the water-based affinity they were known for, was due to her unmistakably violet eyes. Eyes carried both by the Lord Seitree and Seraphal. But the similarities ended right there. Unlike her sister, there was a certain aura of untouchability that surrounded the younger sibling. It almost felt like Sona was trying her hardest to be the very opposite of her sister. And she was succeeding, albeit not very much. While Seraphal was not a very commanding individual, she had a crazy amount of power, and almost perfect control to command people for her. She didn't have the charisma of the Gremory lad, but she did have spunk, a clever mind, and as mentioned before, great power. In Sona's case, it was the very opposite. She was stern, forceful and disciplined. However, what she did not have was power. And it would take a single burst of killing intent to shred the condescending look on her face. But he was an outlier in this political game warred by the powers that be. And it would be remiss of him to show his hand before it was sorely needed. This was devil territory, and his presence, while welcome, would ruin the surprise. He couldn't ruin that now, could he? How may I help you, Mr. Uzumaki? She asked, her visage not betraying her surprise. But Naruto was better than that. If the minuscule tightening of her muscles told him anything, it was that she did not expect to see him here. For one, she had all but avoided him after he had called her in for counseling. He had spent an hour completely dismantling her, and her psychological report was the only negative on her otherwise flawless school record. And that was sure to irk a perfectionist like her. He knew that he was playing with fire, considering the Seitree and the Gremory jointly owned Kuo, both the academy and the city. But firing him would raise questions. His record was solid, and the students loved him. And such questions would jeopardize the secrecy of the underworld. A risk like that would end the two teenage devils' tenure in the mortal realm. And he was completely sure neither of them wanted that. And if that wasn't enough, Rias positively adored him. She was one of the students who frequented his office, mostly because she had discovered Naruto's second biggest addiction on the mortal plane. Figurine collection. Ah, yes. I came here to talk to you about the one true Naruto Uzumaki fan club. I request dissolution of the club, he plainly stated. There was no reason to muck about on the topic. The sea tree raised an eyebrow in interest, a habit that she must have gotten from her father. On what grounds? She asked, and Naruto was almost brought to a stop. What grounds? There was a group of fangirls who had dedicated 6 hours per week just to study him. Was that not reason enough? It seemed the sea tree heiress wanted to play. The little thing actually thought she had all the cards in her hands. How cute. Well, firstly, the club uses my name, so that is an identity issue. Lawsuits have been filed for less. And I'm sure you can understand why I am concerned, considering the club's operations revolve around the studies of yours truly, he answered with a mockingly grandiose bow. And secondly, I am a teacher, albeit a young one. I'd rather not lead these women on. They deserve better and they deserve someone in their own age bracket. The sea tree shook her head. For your first issue, I can notify the club to change their name. If Kentucky Fried Chicken can get away with renaming themselves to KFC, I'm sure the club will do just fine. The smile on her face grew predatorial at this point. And for your second problem, all the girls in the club are at an age where they can decide what, or who, they want. That is a personal choice, and I believe it would be unethical for me to dissolve a club based on personal choice. It was more than apparent that the president had prepared for this. This was definitely her way of getting back at Naruto for the little humiliation he had stained her perfect record with. But Naruto already knew where this was headed, and he was prepared for it. You dissolved Yuto Kiba's fan club, and I could quote verbatim the concerns he raised to you about his own issues. But that would be redundant. You seem to have it out for me, so, let's come to a compromise. What do you want? He asked, leaning back into his seat with absolute confidence. It was all an act, of course. He knew that Kiba's fan club had been dissolved due to a bet Rias had with Sona. Their knights fought, and Kiba came out on top. Sona was good at laying bait, and Naruto had just proclaimed to her that he had taken it. But when a shark bites your bait, you're pretty likely to be the one who needs to be fished out of the water. Whatever's left of you, that is. How about we have a chess match? She innocently asked, a wager, if you will. You win, I dissolve the club, based on the concerns you have raised. And if I win, you re-evaluate me. Her smirk grew as she continued. Of course, you do not have to take up the challenge, and we can easily go our separate ways. Of course, you could always deal with the teachers in charge of the club. You will excuse me if I say that I don't see much of a future in that venture. Ah, so the young devil wanted a game? That was both cruel and crafty. Suddenly, Naruto was reminded that for all her posturing, Sona was still a sea tree first and foremost. And like her sister, had a mean streak a mile wide. To use her experience at chess to not only mark her slate clean, but also to make sure she got her revenge on Naruto. It was a perfect plan, at least, in her head. Of course, she had no idea that Naruto was centuries old, and had centuries of experience playing the one game that devils were oh so obsessed with. Well then, what do I have to lose? He could have sworn that he saw a victorious smirk on her face as she asked her vice president, Shinra Tsubaki, to retrieve her chess set. Little did she know, over the course of the next few hours, that smirk would end up replaced with something a lot less savory. This is absurd. Naruto had to agree. Sona's king was currently beset on one side by Naruto's rook, and his bishop brought up the flank. It was the classic box-in maneuver, and the surprising part was, it had worked on Sona, who was widely proclaimed as one of the underworld's best chess players. But Naruto had played chess with Akuja, and the young sea tree couldn't hold a candle against the green-haired Satan. What surprised him, though, was that it had taken them 221 moves to get to this point. Unlike Akuja, Sona was a lot more composed. It really didn't matter, cause her impatience slowly broke her down. And over the course of 14 long, grueling hours of competition, she allowed Naruto to set up one of the simplest traps in chess, and she fell for it. As he once told Akuja, if you can't play the game, play the player. Well, I believe the result is quite conclusive. Now, if you'd excuse me, I have to get in a few hours of sleep before I report for work. I'm pretty sure the principal won't give me a day off just because I spent the night playing games. His words didn't even reach the dumbstruck young woman. This was a mistake, it had to be. She had lost in chess to a human. Not even a professional player, but a mere psychologist. How would she explain this to her peerage? What face would she show Rias? This was preposterous. People cannot know about this. Naruto was brought to a pause by the sudden, icy cold feeling emanating from Sona. He wouldn't be so surprised had he not seen the same reaction come from someone else, long ago, when he would tease her during training. Sure, Sona was nowhere near as powerful as the other, namely her own sister. But he was sure that he wouldn't be able to handle her and keep her suspicion off him. So, he did what he had never done for her sister. He began to barter. Sure, after a match that long I believe the result can barely be considered conclusive. We're both tired, he answered lazily. Although, it did force me to rethink a few points on your psychology report. I think you should come in again when you're free. I'd like to re-evaluate your report. The effect was immediate. Not only was Naruto okay with completely disregarding the, frankly humiliating, outcome of her challenge, but also offering to take her part of the deal up. As long as you schedule your visit after the fan club is disbanded. Ah, of course. Her opponent had conceded so graciously, it would only be fitting for her to keep up her end of the bargain. She was a high-class devil, and devils were always gracious, even in defeat. She nodded to him with a genuine smile. Maybe, the blonde teacher wasn't quite as bad as she first made him out to be. Naruto slowly made his way to his office. As he walked out of the main campus, the protective glyphs covering the building finally stopped impeding his senses. And he tensed instantly. For in his office, he felt the telltale signature of a devil. One that smelt of, in equal parts, a dragon and a gremmery. He ran to his office and flung open his door, hoping that he was wrong, that it was merely one of Sirzek's many servants, sent over to check up on the school's newest teacher. But the sight of brown hair and a horribly confused face served only to prove the worst of his fears true. Issei had been reincarnated, and just as he would expect from Sirzek, his sister didn't even have the common courtesy to stick around and explain. He took one last look at the kid's confused, borderline fearful face, before asserting control. Gone was the kind, humble school counselor, and in his place was a ruler whom men rallied behind. Tell me everything, right from the beginning. Skip no details. It was bad. There was, presumably, a group of low-level fallen in the city. They had been able to infiltrate Kuo, a hotbed for demonic activity in the human plane, and they had been able to successfully kill the holder of one of the strongest sacred gears in existence, and then escape. He couldn't even remove them from the equation. That would mean revealing himself. His position wasn't just bad, it was downright terrible. And it wasn't even the worst-case scenario. Issei had been lucky enough to contract Rias right before he passed away. She was able to drive away the fallen angel, who had been posing as Issei's girlfriend. He ran some checks in the school's student database, and nobody named Amano Yuma was registered as a student. Rias must have been scouting the boy out, because she barely hesitated before reincarnating him. Normally, a devil would have simply let him die, unless of course they knew him to be the wielder of a Longinus-class sacred gear. Rias was either extremely generous or extremely crafty. And considering the fact that she was a gremmery, Naruto was inclined to say she was both in equal measure. Let him die, so that he doesn't get to choose whether he wants to be a devil. But make sure to revive him, however many pieces he may cost. Hell, he was pretty sure not even Rias could tell which sacred gear he held. Sure, it was draconic in nature. But then it could be any one of the hundreds of dragon-based gears that existed. After all, even the twice critical was technically a draconic sacred gear, mass-produced from droplets of blood from Diedrich. And that's what happened. Now, I cannot find Yuma, and no one else seems to remember her. Of course, it made perfect sense that the boy would be confused. For someone who held a Longinus, he was woefully unaware of the world around him, both the occult and the normal. Else, the immunity his draconic tenant provided him against lower-grade magic would have made sure Yuma's mental spell never even touched him. Yet, the moment he found out that there was an attractive girl interested in him, he threw caution to the wind and simply went for it. Of course, he was Issei, a simple, kind teenage boy, if a bit, extremely, perverted, so it was expected. That's because she was never a student here. I just checked the school records, Naruto answered, turning his laptop around so that Issei could see. As for what all you told me, I think I have a general idea about what happened last night. He answered. Issei perked up a bit, hoping he'd finally get some answers. You died. The teen stopped, his breathing, movement, even the expression on his face went blank. Of course, completely disregarding the simpler explanations, he directly went for the most far-fetched one. Wait, so you're saying that I'm a ghost? But I can't pass through walls, look. Before the blonde could even get a single word in edgewise, Issei shot up from his seat and dashed headfirst into a wall. To his credit, he got up a mere second after his cranium impacted the solid marble flooring. See? Completely physical, he touted, pointing at himself for the sake of emphasis. Naruto sighed. Hey Issei, imagine having wings. Okay. Let me get into my thinking pose. Issei spoke before closing his eyes. A second later, two very pronounced black wings phased into existence, their slight added weight knocking Issei out of his contemplative, albeit stupid, pose. His confusion grew as his mind grasped at what little knowledge of the occult he had. Bat wings? There was only one connection he could make. Please, tell me I'm not a monster, or a demon, he hesitantly pleaded, fearing Naruto's response. Naruto shook his head. No, you're not a demon. As he said this, a wave of relief passed over the brown-haired boy. You're a devil. If you were a demon or a monster, I'd have to kill you. The look on Issei's face was priceless. The blood ran out of his face, leaving it as colorless as a sheet of acetate. He locked eyes with Naruto, silently hoping, no, pleading that this was all just a joke. But the blonde's face betrayed nothing. This was serious. He had died, and now, he was locked in a room with someone who knew more about his situation than he himself did. And that someone had just dropped a comment about killing him almost without a second thought. If that wasn't terrifying, he didn't know what else qualified for that tag. But how? He asked the million-dollar question. Naruto stared at him for a second, surprised that the boy still hadn't put two and two together. He remembered seeing Rias as he died. He remembered getting impaled by a light spear by someone whose wings were very much different than the ones he had. And yet he wondered how he was in his current state. Naruto could understand if he simply thought seeing Rias was a hallucination, but still. He had to suppress a sigh as he launched into explanation. As far as I can tell from your recount, you were reincarnated by a devil. And by devil, I mean Rias Gremory, he answered. Issei took it rather well, and by that he meant only blanching slightly, apparently having finally made the connection between Rias' presence and him being a devil. I think you should consult her on well, everything, really. If you want answers, she's your best bet, he reasoned, getting a subservient nod from Issei. As he got up to leave, Naruto realized that he had yet to breach the most important topic. Oh, by the way. Do not tell Rias, or anyone for that matter, about this conversation we just had. He got a confused look from Issei in return. When discussing the occult, things tend to get really convoluted very fast. People get involved for the smallest of things, and I definitely do not want to be involved, as far as Rias is concerned. Issei stopped for a second before nodding once in confirmation and leaving, closing the door behind him. Once he was out of earshot, Naruto quickly created a clone and told it to man his office. The Fallen were encroaching on devil territory, and he needed to know why. And there was no better way to get answers than to get them straight from the source. Barakiel, I've had it with you covering for Azazel. Now, are you going to hand me that pile of trash, or do I have to fight you for it? Barakiel stared at his friend with fear. Shemazai was angry. For the Fallen who once held the angelic post of the Watcher, Shemazai preferred a much more hands-on approach than many would expect from an ex-archangel whose job was to observe and not be involved with events. But he could hardly be blamed. Their fearless leader, Azazel, was doing a really shitty job at keeping up with both his own titles. Such force is hardly warranted, Shem, Azazel whined. Those objects are of my utmost curiosity. Why, just yesterday I actually got one of those human devices to work. He exclaimed, as he held up a rather cutesy toaster in his hands, a light blue with a bright pink heart on the side. It actually toasts a smiley face into the bread you pop into it. Isn't that ingenious? Shemazai answered by sending a bolt of light through the toaster, the small explosion forcing out a yelp from Azazel. If these things are more important to you than the matters of our faction, I wonder if you're the right person for the job, he countered, the steel in his tone making both his companions flinch. If this is how you plan to spend the rest of your days, then you should just retire. Azazel sighed. He was about to launch into an explanation of how every bit of research that led to the replication of sacred gear was time well spent, but he was stopped by the smell of ozone that suddenly made it into the room. The pile of trash, no, relics that lay behind Barakiel began to glow with a golden light, before a sudden mass was added to it, making it crash down on the poor fallen angel. And out of the heat came a man who looked rather out of place in the current room. Mostly because of how ordinary he felt. There wasn't a single shred of any detectable power around the blonde. And to most, he would come across as a mere human, nothing special, just a human who had somehow managed to magically transport himself into a room that was currently inhabited by the three strongest members of the Grigori. Rare, but due to Azazel's eccentric experimentations, not entirely unheard of. But then, the man's skin rippled, and like a curtain, his appearance fell away and was replaced by something a lot more recognizable. Azazel had to say, time was kind to his old enemy turned friend. His blonde hair was scruffy, and came down to his shoulders. The blonde was taller than anyone in the room, and that was saying something. If not for the 3 whisker marks on his face, and those unmistakably blue eyes, Azazel would have never been able to recognize the devil, no. Demon who had almost killed him a dozen times, just to let him go at the end of it all. What his 2 followers recognized, instead, was the oppressive amount of power the blonde was exuding. That had felt it before, anyone who had participated in the final century of the war would. It was one of 3 distinct feelings that represented doom on the battlefield. And they knew which one this was. So, you live, Naruto Abaddon, Azazel stated. Any pretense of playfulness was instantly removed from his tone. Behind him, his 2 friends tensed. They did not like their odds in this battle. Sure, they were once archangels, but Naruto Abaddon was a core member of the Phoenix team, a team whose arrival signaled a bloody end to any conflict they chose to be a part of. Flee on sight, was the general command given to all fallen when faced with them. And of all 3, he was possibly the one that provided the hardest challenge. One could deal with the healing of the Phoenix, but the sheer versatility Naruto had shown in the war was something no countermeasure survived contact with. I'm a hard man to kill, he answered, before staring down his adversaries. You seem to be prepared for my eventual appearance though. It seems you have been warned. Naruto looked at Azazel's 2 advisors. They had both flared their wings, 20 together, still not much of a threat to him. The leader of the Grigori himself looked composed, if a bit intrigued. Bara, Shem, calm down. I'm pretty sure he didn't choose to come here to end dear old me. He got his followers to lower their weapons, which they did, albeit hesitantly. You don't seem to have come here to fight. So, tell me, how can I help you? He asked, completely disregarding the notion that the person standing in front of him was very possibly the single most dangerous devil in existence. Naruto allowed himself a light chuckle. Perceptive as always. Now, let's get to the elephant in the room. What do you know of Kuo? He asked, noticing the confusion on Azazel's face. Well, began. Kuo is a human city under the joint governance of the Citri and Gremory families. It is an active devil hotbed. My fallen are under command to not set foot there without express orders from myself. Naruto nodded, doing nothing to alleviate his quarry's confusion. But you already knew that, so why ask me? Naruto shook his head. I've currently set up shop in Kuo, and yesterday, I felt the presence of a few fallen on the city's outskirts. I thought they were on a diplomatic mission, considering the security Kuo offers to devilkind. But last night, one of these fallen murdered a sacred gear user. If not for the handy intervention of the Gremory house, the Longinus, boosted gear, would have gone dormant for yet another generation. Azazel stopped dead in his tracks. Now, you seem like a smart guy to me, so, I believe there's some other reason why the fallen are so intent on starting a new war. Now, mind cluing me in on what's been going on in your ranks? 'Cause frankly, this jeopardizes the secrecy I have worked so hard to forge. Azazel grimaced. There was more to it than Naruto could possibly know, but the blonde, notwithstanding his limited interaction with the occult over the past few centuries, had still been able to piece together that there was a greater force behind this mishap. Well, you see, since the war ended, there's been a bit of a divide between us fallen. Barakiel covered for his leader. A few of the Grigori have left their posts, and taken with them a number of our legions, be it through force or old ties from when they were still part of the heavenly host. Intrigued, Naruto turned to face Azazel. Even the silver-tongued Azazel couldn't keep his faction under his thumb? Interesting, but expected, especially from a faction that was created through betrayal. If the three fallen took his words as an insult, they didn't show it. Their restraint was commendable, be it on the field of battle or off. So, kindly tell me the name of the one responsible, and I will try to make sure and send you whatever remains of him in a nice little party basket. Azazel stiffened at the malicious tone that crept into Naruto's words. I'm afraid I cannot let you kill him. He is a fallen, and we ourselves will deal with him. For what he did, he will spend an eternity in Cocytus. If you help us deliver this judgment to him, we shall tell you of his identity, Azazel demanded. There aren't many of us left, and whatever little power we have, we are not willing to squander it. Even if he is mad, even if he is traitorous, he is still one of us. And I cannot, in good faith, let you slaughter him. Naruto held his gaze, the determination in his eyes shining through. When all was said and done, Azazel had done an admirable job at keeping the fallen in line, especially given their very nature. A leader of a deceitful race, yet someone who stood up for his kind, despite their traitorous nature. Spirit like that was commendable. Hence, he acquiesced. As long as they do not act out of line again, I promise I will refrain from killing them, Naruto proposed, and Azazel took it. His name is Kokabiel, a 10-winged fallen. Him and his legion left our fold a few months ago. The last I heard of him, he was in Western Europe, Azazel answered. A concerned look replaced the impassivity of his face. The ones in Kuo, on the other hand, are from my faction. Yet, Kokabiel seems to have bewitched them. There are 4 of them, each with 1 set of wings. Surprised, Naruto raised a brow. 4 low-class fallen? To attack a town like Kuo? Together, maybe they could challenge a mid-class devil, but both the clan heirs in Kuo are high class. Both by birth and ability. They'd be decimated before they could so much as materialize a single light spear. Azazel nodded. Even though they had a rather sheltered upbringing, the Cetri and Gremory heiresses were no joke, and that was completely discounting their diverse, powerful peerages. They're out of their depth here. And political stipulations place them out of my range. They will die out there. Hence, if I may, I'd like to ask you for a favor. Naruto laughed. A favor? For you? The man who cut down countless members of my race mercilessly? For the man who made angels fall like rain? Give me one reason why I do that. Azazel didn't rise to the bait. Instead he raised 2 fingers. I could give you 2. For one, I have some information that expressly concerns you. And second, we'll keep all knowledge of you secret. Hell, we'll even add in information about the underworld, which you seem to sorely lack. Naruto thought it over for a moment. Azazel was one of the most informed members of the moonlit world. He had always been a man who valued information over power, which even showed during the war. He'd cut off supply lines and take down larger garrisons of both devils and angels. He wasn't a master tactician just because of his heavenly standing. The man was genuinely the closest thing there was to a true spymaster among the leagues of the occult. And Naruto could definitely make do with more knowledge of the world, even though he did have his own feelers out. Kage Bunshin were useful like that. But due to his devil blood, he couldn't infiltrate the underworld anymore. The registration glyphs on the border of the underworld couldn't be fooled by seals. He had learnt that the hard way. Okay, I'll bite. What do I have to do? He asked. The smile of relief that appeared on Azazel's face told him that he could have bargained for more, but that wasn't important. It wasn't as if Azazel could provide him with anything else that he truly wanted anyways. The 4 fallen angels in Kuo are not evil, they are merely misguided. If it is at all possible, I would like you to retrieve them. He sighed. As for the first part of our deal, heaven has lost another one of its archangels. Naruto looked at Azazel with a pensive expression. Sure, that was a rare event in itself, but he didn't understand why it concerned him. And that was when Azazel dropped the metaphorical hammer. It was Raziel. Oh shit. Raziel, the keeper of the mysteries, one of the strongest of the archangels, and Naruto's self-appointed rival. The number of archangels that outranked Raziel in power could be counted on one hand. The fact that she had fallen was quite grave indeed, especially given the fact that she had gained something of an unhealthy obsession with Naruto around the end of the war. Please don't tell me that she's looking for me, Naruto pleaded, grasping at straws. To his dismay, Azazel shook his head. Raziel is the keeper of mysteries, she's the archangel whose task is the most daunting and varied of them all. And according to her, you are a greater mystery than even the origin of Trihexa. As such, she's attracted to your location. It would be safe to say that given a couple of days, she'll find you. At least you have some time to prepare, and possibly appease her. Naruto shook his head. You've given me a lot to think about. I believe you'll send me a dossier on the recent developments in the underworld once I fulfill your requirements. Azazel nodded. Naruto allowed a small smile to grace his face, which unnerved his three companions a bit too much for their personal tastes. As for my secret, I sincerely hope you keep it. Because over the centuries, I have come to be rather close to dragonkind. As such, I know of your artificial sacred gear. If you leak my secret, I can disappear again. You, on the other hand, will have to answer to both Sirzex and Michael about it. I believe they'll be most curious about how you managed to replicate a power that can be traced back to God himself. Naruto took a second to savor the look of abject horror on the fallen angels' faces. I'd say it was a pleasure doing business with you, but I'll hold my judgment on that till you fulfill your end of the bargain. And for your sake, I hope you do. Before Azazel could come up with a reply, Naruto disappeared in a shower of golden sparks, leaving all three fallen angels with one singular thought in their minds. How did he even get here? Unbeknownst to them, a small seal faded out of view, hidden behind Azazel's high collar. A small gift from Naruto that had been there ever since they faced off in the war. Better safe than sorry, after all. One week of constant shadow clone surveillance was enough to notify Naruto that not only were the four fallen in Kuo smart, choosing to spread out and hide among humans, denying him the opportunity to take them out stealthily. Together, they generally assembled in a church on the outskirts of the city. But he couldn't risk going there. 'Cause that's where she had made her home. Raziel, the Archangel of Mysteries. She was generally paired with Raphael and Casfiel during the war, and whenever they were deployed, so were the members of Naruto's team. Originally, Naruto had believed Raziel to be male, considering her robes, the completely covered attire of a mage. It was only after repeated confrontations and an unintended wardrobe malfunction that Naruto's team learnt that Raziel was a woman. As the Archangel of Mysteries, it did make sense. To keep the mysteries of the world was her divine duty, and that duty was what had led her to Kuo. Though Naruto was pretty adept at hiding himself, he was rather skeptical about his chances of escaping Raziel's scrutiny. He didn't want to take a chance, and had the patience needed to make sure he didn't need to. Once Raziel decided that Kuo was merely a false alarm, or the four fallen angels decided to make a move, he'd make his own. Till then, it was all about planning, and he was fine with that. But what really confused him was Kokabiel and his endgame. He had sent four, two-winged fallen to take on a bastion of devilkind, one guarded by two of the strongest families in the underworld, manned by the heirs of said families. They weren't misdirection, he could tell, and they were obviously proficient and crafty, as the fallen were wont. They had displayed their ingenuity in the way that they had taken out Issei, but the devils of Kuo were not far behind in their own wily ways. Rias had been there, she had known, and she had acted. Hell, she had even pulled one off on him. It was pointless to blame her, considering the fallen had the means and power to successfully disguise themselves to resemble humans, considering the fact that sin ran through both species, and both were once holy, righteous creations of the Almighty. The sin of the humans was disobeying the will of God, of consuming the forbidden fruit. The sin of the fallen was betraying their purpose. In all honesty, the difference between the two races was merely one of circumstance. Back to the point, Kokabiel. Naruto had met Kokabiel and his legion on the fields of battle twice, and each time, the valiant, smart legions under Kokabiel's leadership had held them off long enough to allow his faction to retreat. He was a good leader, a man who knew war like the back of his hand. And with a title like Kokabiel of the Legion, that was to be expected. He had 10 wings, but if mental alacrity and militaristic acumen were something to go by, Naruto would consider him 12-winged. Hence, his move surprised Naruto. It was too obvious to be a misdirection, and too stupid to be successful. The only reason Naruto could guess was that Kokabiel merely wanted to get rid of these few fallen. Considering they were operating under the illusion that their orders came directly from Azazel, it would definitely raise concerns among the other two factions. Azazel wouldn't sell Kokabiel out, considering he wanted to deal with his erstwhile underling personally. And the other factions would take that as a challenge. All in all, the only purpose it served was to remove Confrontation from public vision. That could only mean his plan relied on stealth. As a shinobi, he could easily draw this conclusion. But the men and women of the occult were prideful. They were the kind of people that believed in power above finesse. Part of the reason he was so successful in the war was because he could generally use their hubris against them. But Confrontation was not like that. He had never been like that. And in that regard, he had Naruto's respect. But respect didn't wipe away doubts. Instead, it merely served to bring them to the forefront. Confrontation wouldn't openly defy Azazel unless his plan was already near fruition. And considering that his legion had left with him too, his plan would be much more large-scale than Azazel could guess. This was why he didn't like fighting the Fallen, or for that matter, humans. They were wily opponents and had the smarts to back up their power. And that was why the Fallen, even though the faction possessed merely one 12-winged angel, were one of the biggest threats of the Great War. If push came to shove, he'd act. But in case things went according to plan, he wouldn't have to. The Red Dragon Emperor had awoken, and he could always be Naruto's proxy. And if that didn't work out, he could always work through a path. The Rinnegan was useful like that. As he filed in his paperwork for the day, planning to make it home early and possibly cook himself some ramen, he was caught unaware by a knock on his door. Sensing the draconic presence of his protégé, he sat down. The door opened, and Issei all but ran and crashed on his chair. Apparently, he'd been running for a while now, if the perspiration on his face was anything to go by. But what really brought Naruto to a stop were the emotions coming from him, and more so, the fact that he barely needed to read them to understand what had transpired. Because the look on Issei's face was something he remembered far too well. He remembered seeing it on his own face, a long time ago, before he was embroiled in the doings of devilkind. Someone he cared for was in danger. "I need your help," Issei exclaimed between labored breaths. Naruto nodded before folding his hands under his chin. And with a perfectly neutral face, he spoke. "Tell me everything, from the start." It was just as he expected. The Fallen were brash, but they had made their move. They had kidnapped a sacred gear holder right under Gremory's nose, in Gremory territory no less. And if Issei's account of her powers was to be believed, the girl held a healing sacred gear, one of the rarest and most treasured kinds. In some ways, the rarity of healing sacred gears even outshot that of the Longinus. And he had an inkling of what they planned to do with it. He had seen Azazel's old machines in action, seen the horrifying process that preceded the removal of a sacred gear. But this was Gremory turf. So why was Issei asking him for help? "I understand your concerns, but why would you come to me about this and not go to Rias?" he asked. Though he knew the answer. The girl would make for an amazing peerage member, undoubtedly. But as a holy maiden, would she even accept Rias' proposal? In this case, wasn't it better to remove the choice from the equation altogether? It was ingenious, sure, but it was equally inhumane. It wasn't something Naruto could stand for. Issei shook his head. "She told me not to mess with angels, even if they're fallen. She doesn't know Asia, and she is too scared of risking me." His head fell and his body started to tremble. "She's willing to sacrifice Asia just so that I can be safe." The trembling increased, and so did his voice. "But I promised her that she'd be my friend. I promised to keep her safe. What kind of person would I be if I can't even keep the people I care about safe?" Naruto smiled. The resemblance was uncanny. Unlike him, who had to be taught the meaning of true strength by Haku, Issei already understood it. His interactions with the brown-haired devil were just proving him to be a worthy successor to his legacy. Of course, he had to test the boy further. He needed to know just how far the boy was willing to go in order to make sure those he cares for are safe. "Remember, I told you that I do not want to be embroiled in the machinations of devilkind. So, kindly explain why you believe I'll be willing to charge into fallen angel territory with you?" he asked, making Issei tense up further. The resolve that crept up into the young boy's eyes was admirable indeed. "You'll be going with me, so you won't have to reveal yourself. Rias doesn't know that I plan to go against her orders," he answered, his voice not wavering once and his will not even remotely bending to Naruto, but the unheard question still hung heavy between the two of them. "And if you refuse, I'll tell Rias that you know about the occult." Instantly, Issei was floored by a wave of killing intent sending him to the floor as he felt his heart pump painfully in his chest. He struggled to stand back up, but his body just didn't obey him. He could barely raise his head to look at the man who he had come to for help, and all he met was a face that could never, possibly belong to the friendly student counselor he had come to know over the past few months. Dead, that was the best way to describe it. There was no pretense of familiarity on Naruto's face, no inkling of mercy. It was blank, and the feeling he got from him promised nothing but death, an agonizing, drawn-out death with no hesitance, with no joy or sorrow being wrought from the act. He gulped. He couldn't let this stop him. He had to save Asia. Under extreme duress, something inside the boy clicked. His sacred gear, which, till this point, Rias thought was a twice critical, manifested on his arm. And as he looked down at it, it began to change. The sharp, draconic ridges began to expand outwards, and green gem in the middle expanded and pulsed with otherworldly energies. The gauntlet grew into his fingers, giving him red, draconic claws. This wasn't what Rias said it would do. Suddenly, he felt himself fill with power, and finally, through exertion, he was able to stand. Trembling with the force needed to complete the Herculean task, he looked Naruto straight in the eye. "You kill me, and the Gremory will never leave you alone." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as his killing intent dropped. Never, not even in his wildest dreams, had the thought that Issei would one day come up to him and use sound logic to convince him to cooperate. He had to hold back a laugh. Unlike him as a kid, and defying all the tags society had given to him, Issei had come up with a sound plan to use him to further his own plans. Ingenious. Really? Naruto smiled. "You pass. You'll have my help. So, what do you need me to do?" Issei blinked in confusion. A mere second ago, Naruto was holding him to the ground using nothing but his sense of danger. And now, he was leaning back on his chair, completely relaxed, telling him that he had passed. He wanted to ask about it. But time was running low. He couldn't let idle banter get in the way of Asia's safety. "They're holed up in a church outside town. You handle the small fry, and I'll go and get Asia back." There was no doubt in Issei's voice. It was a simple statement of fact, a rejection of possibility that he could fail to save Asia. Naruto smiled before drawing a quick hand seal. Before Issei could say anything, both him and the blonde Uzumaki disappeared in a shower of golden sparks. When Issei's eyes finally recovered from the freak light show, all he could do was gape. In front of him was the church he had told Naruto about. If the all-knowing smile on Naruto's face was anything to go by, he had already scouted the place out. The other thing that Issei noticed was the sudden feeling of danger, great danger, that emanated from the church. This wasn't the danger he had felt when he faced Ryanair, or even Donaseek. This was greater, magnitudes greater. And he was sure he was not capable of dealing with it. He gulped, and looked over to the blonde, who was now humming a tune while carrying a shit-eating grin on his face. "Still want me to take care of the small fry, Issei?" The church was quite beautiful, if something was to be said about it. A large hall, leading to a chiseled marble altar, backed by a fresco made by a masterful glassworker. Beautiful it was, but dilapidated in equal measure. The carpets, once red and vibrant, were mere rotted stains the color of spilt wine on the ground. The benches, once hewn out of the most beautiful redwoods, were nothing more than breeding grounds for the multiple infestations that now called the church home. The dichotomy was ironic and sad in equal measure. So was the fact that a church, the bastion for the holy, now served as a hiding spot for the fallen, the lesser evil, but unworthy of the light just as well. A faction that was comprised solely of the scum of angel kind, abandoned by heaven itself. Oh, how similar they were to this abandoned church. Irony at its finest. "How many of them are here?" Issei asked. Naruto took a second to break out of his reverie, and chose to face his companion. "There are 4 fallen, and over a dozen exorcists. You don't need to worry about them. Ryanair is in the sanctuary behind the main hall." He pointed towards the rather ominous-looking door leading downstairs. Issei locked eyes with him once again. "What happened to the ominous presence we felt outside?" Naruto chuckled. Raziel's aura had diminished the moment he flared his own. She knew he was here. And she was content with that knowledge. She didn't wish to confront him while he was in the presence of someone so far below her stature. She might have fallen, but she was still an angel. And for an angel, pride always came first and foremost. "Oh, she'll be here soon enough." As for the others, Naruto quickly drew a one-handed seal, making 15 clones pop into existence and completely stunning Issei. Quote ellipsis. They are none of your concern. You have a job to do, a princess to save. Issei held Naruto's gaze for a scant second before realizing that there was no other way to tackle this. He didn't know Naruto's power. He had no way of knowing that he was currently in a room with what could only be considered the strongest devil in history. But the benign smile on Naruto's face told him what mere words could not. He would survive, there were no two ways about it. He rushed towards the sanctuary. If Naruto's resolve was great enough to fight the owner of that oppressive aura, he couldn't afford to be afraid of Ryanair. It is uncanny how people you think you know can still surprise you, Naruto muttered, watching Issei's retreating back. That goes for you too, by the way. Never thought you'd fall, Raziel-chan. As he turned to face the sudden, suffocating aura that had suddenly manifested behind him, an aura that didn't so much as elicit a twitch from him, he was faced with a creature that could only be defined through the tag of divinity. Her face was thin, almost elfin, with those high cheekbones and those perfect eyelashes of hers, like a barrier guarding her bright green eyes from the world. Her blonde hair was cut short, reaching only down to her shoulders, but it only served to bring out the beauty of her elfin features. She was dressed in black rags, possibly the only thing she could find in her short tenure as one of the fallen, but it didn't remove from her body at all. She wasn't buxom, by any definition of the word. She didn't quite have the same assets as someone like Rias, but was still firm enough to leave something to the mind. Her body curved at all the right angles. But then again, what less could be expected from the echelons of heaven, when even the least impressive of their kind looked like fucking supermodels? The final stroke to the painting were her wings. Once, they were pure white, all 12 of them, denoting her status as an archangel, the greatest of the great. If Naruto wasn't the man he was, he'd have buckled to the feeling of supremacy she exuded. It almost felt as if her mere presence demanded obedience. Her aura was telling his body to kneel, to cower before her, in all her beauty and power. But he was Naruto Uzumaki. And Naruto Uzumaki knelt to no man. A wave of killing intent surged from his body, blowing away the benches that surrounded him. The earth cracked, and Raziel's floating visage was brought down to the ground. All 12 wings drooped, touching the ground. She released more power to even out, but the perfect image she presented was broken. The concentrated expression of effort on her face barely showed, but it told Naruto enough that Raziel would not be the one marking the terms of this argument. Some of us fall due to forbidden love, some of us fall for lust of power. Raziel spoke in a voice which was close to a breeze than something a mouth could produce, her glare boring imaginary holes into Naruto's own cerulean orbs. Well, the reason I fell is standing right here in front of me, Abaddon. If Naruto was surprised, he didn't show it. I go by Naruto Uzumaki these days, he corrected, a sick grin appearing on his face. And you claim you fell for me? Then how come you're here, in a holy shack, ready to fight me? Did you fall because you wanted revenge for all your brethren I killed? In that case, wouldn't Arya be your target of choice? His grin grew larger. Or did little old me impress you so much that you couldn't stop thinking about the hanky-panky? Raziel shook her head. The scowl on her face was the only response he got to his last comment, considering she decided to completely disregard it as it came. I have no desire for vengeance. I fell because of you. Because of what you represent. This time, Naruto was quite confused. Sensing the change in his oppressive chakra, Raziel sighed. Your power, it feels like nothing I have ever experienced before. You are a mere devil from a lower house, yet you could hold your own against the best of us. As the Archangel of Mysteries, it is my right to know what you are, who you are, she answered, pointing at him, incriminatingly. You do not fit in the nexus of this world, and the only way I will get my answers is through you. Naruto shook his head in disbelief. Wait, so you're saying, you fell because you wanted to know me better? I might not know much about the laws of the light, but doesn't that seem a bit too stringent? After all, knowing thy enemy is one of the very cornerstones of wartime strategy? To this, Raziel responded with a muted chuckle, even as her face remained stoic through it all. And you believe that to be an easy task? She asked. The entire library of the high heavens, I perused. The ancient scrolls of human lords, I scrolled. The entire omnibus of this planet's history, I scoured. Works written by Father himself in his own divine blood, I dissected for a hint of a link. And yet, I could not find a single recorded instance of the powers you use. You, Naruto Abaddon, are a mystery that I simply could not let go. Hence, I committed the ultimate sin, she proclaimed, efficiently shutting her blonde quarry up before he could so much as formulate a retort. I partook knowledge that is forbidden to my kind, she answered. I approached the fates, and while they were originally hesitant to aid me, I made them talk. Black feathers ruffled in the airy gusts that came through the church's broken fresco, leaving almost no doubts as to what she meant by persuasion. Clotho, the youngest, told me that she had never spun the thread of your fate. Lachesis, the elder, told me that she had never measured the length of your thread. And Atropos, the eldest, she told me that her scissors couldn't cut something that simply didn't exist. Naruto paled. Of course, the three sisters of fate. Greek goddesses who guarded the forbidden knowledge of their namesake, fate. Ones who could tell the life and death of a man through a mere look. These women had failed to find his fate, because, simply put, he didn't belong here. And as such, him having one would be both, redundant and impossible, in equal measure. Raziel caught up on this and smirked victoriously. So, you do have the answers. Very well, I shall take them from you. Naruto snapped out of his sudden lapse of concentration. And you believe I'm just going to willingly spill the beans to someone who was, at least till a few days ago, fighting for the other side? He was answered by the materialization of 100 orbs of pure light all around his current opponent. He barely moved in time as they all shot out, completely destroying the ground where he stood mere moments ago. I knew you wouldn't give over your secrets lightly, she answered, preparing for another strike as the first volley were still being dodged by the blonde devil. Which is why I have been preparing for this day. Naruto dodged yet another sphere before pulling out a seal and using the pre-drawn array to absorb all the light in an area. He was met with success as the orbs forming around Raziel suddenly dimmed and faded away. The seal of eternal darkness, the reason why he had been able to succeed where his fellow devils failed in the war. You'll have to try better than that, Missy. Naruto shot back as he rushed in towards his opponent at a speed too fast for even her angelic eyes to follow. As he was about to jab a chakra-reinforced fist into her abdomen and end the frankly pointless fight, his reflexes kicked in, making him jump back just in time to see 3 balls of an unknown energy whiz by the place where his head had been merely a fraction of a second ago. As such, he quickly backed off, glaring daggers at Raziel, who seemed to have a rather self-satisfied expression on her face. The last time we fought, I suffered loss at your hands, merely because you nulled the light we use. The orbs that surrounded her this time were pure white, not golden. The power he felt within these orbs was too great for it to merely be light. So, I created a new source of power, again, a forbidden art, as we angels are only meant to use God's gifts as our weapons. This power is decidedly not something God would bestow on us, almighty power, the bringer of the apocalypse. The orbs began to revolve her, slowly at first, but steadily gaining speed. You are possibly the fastest person I have ever met on the field of battle. It doesn't matter, when faced with the ultimate defense, you will fall. Almighty vortex, she yelled as the hundreds of orbs created a defensive, rotating sphere surrounding her. Naruto had to give her props, the plan was well thought out. Too bad, it wouldn't stand for much. Now, fall, Heaven's Gate, she shouted, as she shot towards Naruto at a mind-boggling speed, her orbs destroying anything they touched. Naruto took the chance to dodge, setting up a seal on the ground, his own modified, area-based version of the Hiraishin. As the seal spread outwards, he used it to dodge Raziel's attack yet again, disappearing in a shower of sparks. You can't hit me if you can't catch me, he taunted, dodging yet another charge. Raziel stopped, realizing that Naruto could definitely dodge her attacks till Kingdom Come. She rose off the ground on her 12, outstretched wings, her vortex shrinking closer to her body. Did you really think my attack was merely defensive? Even I'm not stupid enough to believe that I could beat you in a war of attrition. The orbs making up the vortex suddenly stopped rotating and started to vibrate in place. Now, face the second phase of my technique. Almighty vortex. Splash. The orbs shot out at a speed that not even Naruto could follow. Hundreds of them, fired off like a shotgun's buckshot. He couldn't dodge, so instead, he stood his ground, as a flash of gold enveloped him. The orbs impacted, causing explosions wherever they hit. The effect was immediate as the entire church hall collapsed around her. Raziel allowed herself a small smile, knowing beyond doubt that her quarry would no longer be able to fight back. As the dust settled, though, the smile instantly turned sour. As her opponent came into view, that sour expression turned into one of abject terror. Defending Naruto was a shield of pure gold, a metal that by all rights would have melted like butter under the force of her attack. But seldom were such weapons ever what they appeared to be, for the only weapons of gold that ever survived the test of time were those forged by the gods themselves. The Deus Xiphos, Michael's sword, was forged out of gold, which could fell even the strongest of foes. A weapon that could cleave through Trihexa itself. But the Deus Xiphos had never filled her with the same sense of foreboding that Naruto's shield did. The fact that said shield was now rapidly transforming into a sword did nothing to comfort her either. That weapon, do you even comprehend what you wield? She hesitantly questioned, getting a sheepish smile from Naruto. Even I'm not that dumb, Raziel. Say hello to the samsara. He replied, raising the simple, yet deadly, single-edged bastard sword in a mock salute. Raziel seethed with anger, the weapon created and wielded by the traitor of humanity. How apt. I hope you realize that I cannot let you carry the very essence of creation in your hands. Without further ado, more orbs appeared around the Arcanist fallen. That weapon is too dangerous to be entrusted to the hands of a devil. Naruto let out a challenging laugh. Well then, let's fight for it. Fair warning, I really cannot hold back when using this. The only reply he got was the reformation of Raziel's vortex. This time, she spread her wings to their full wingspan. She was going to charge him. And he didn't plan to disappoint. Hit me with your best shot, Abaddon. Almighty crush. She shot off towards him, the power of her wings adding to her speed. Had he been who he once was, before being reincarnated, the attack would have killed him with ease. But now, well, things were different. He started to run towards Raziel, one hand on samsara as he channeled chakra into it, almost rivaling Raziel's own power. In the matter of a second, they'd clash. And when she was in his sword's reach, he let the power he had built up loose. I'm sorry for this. Deathbound. His sword slashed out, surrounded by the golden glow of his chakra mixing with samsara's own arcane powers. It clashed with Raziel's attack, and the orbs made a noise almost akin to a crunch, before the combined power of both attacks decided that it didn't like being compressed. And it expanded, taking out whatever was left of the church's main hall in a dome of golden light. Asia, no, talk to me. The scene that played out in front of Naruto as he walked in told him loud and clear that Issei had failed. For one, the boy looked like he had been beaten within an inch of his life. The only reason he was still alive was because he could, apparently, take a lot more punishment than Ryanair, who was out cold in a corner. One clean punch was all it had taken to end her, the fact that she still lived proving that Issei still held belief in the sanctity of life. Even if it was the life of the person who had killed him, and effectively, the only female friend he had made of his own volition. Uzumaki-sensei. Issei yelled, a look of helplessness on his face. Please, you have to help her, he pleaded. Naruto simply nodded before grabbing hold of Issei's shoulder and initiating a Hiraishin to his house. Issei barely got time to react to the sudden change of scenery as Naruto quickly took Asia's unmoving body from him and lay her out on his bed. Stand outside, and no matter what you hear, do not enter. Naruto admonished, his voice cold as ice. Issei gulped, but nodded. He had asked for Naruto's help, and Naruto had yet to let him down. He'd trust his teacher once more. He had no other alternative, after all. I'll let you know when it's done. Also, best of luck explaining what happened to Rias. If my calculations are correct, she should be here in less than 3 minutes. Issei's audible gasp was the last thing he heard as he closed the door behind him. In front of him lay Asia, and as he expected, her soul no longer inhabited the mortal coil. Well, he could definitely take care of that. A ripple spread outwards in his eyes as his usual pools of cerulean were replaced by the rippling, patterned violet red of the Rinne Sharingan. Come, Shinigami, Gedo, Mugen Rinne Tensai no Jutsu, Outer Path, Infinite Art of True Rebirth. And it materialized, the gaunt, ethereal specter that was the god of death, the reaper of souls, Shinigami. The sense of wrongness it emitted was physically quantifiable. Of course, Naruto had long ascended the realm of power he held, But that didn't stop him from being revolted by the sheer sense of dread that permeated from the creature that controlled death itself. "What do you want, child? Have you summoned me here again simply because the effect of death was simply not to your liking?" it asked, and for good reason. The last time Naruto had summoned him was when he ran into an orphanage that had been destroyed by a stray devil, and that had been centuries ago, when the humans were a lot more perceptive, and the devils were a lot less secretive. "I want you to release her soul," he spoke, no, ordered. If he had been anyone else, the Shinigami would have had him pay with his life. But not him. A creature that could fight the two heavenly dragons did not beg, he did not trade. The Shinigami knew that, and he knew he had no say in the matter. When power asked for something, it wasn't a request. It was a demand, it was absolution. "So be it, but before I do that, I will do you the courtesy of showing you the life that you wish to prolong." Before Naruto could counter, he was hit by a wave of memories. Memories of an orphan, living a life of destitution. Memories of her learning about the powers bestowed upon her by the divine. Memories of how the kids in her orphanage treated her like a freak. Memories of beatings, of abuse. Of her getting better with her powers, by using them on herself. Memories of her running away. Memories of her starving. Memories of her indoctrination into the church. Memories of being a holy maiden, and finally being accepted by her peers. Memories of it all going away, only because she made one single mistake. Red chakra slowly started to emerge from Naruto, the red tint in his eyes growing more predominant. It was his life, all over again. Except, her power, her personality, unlike his, had been so mellow, so lovable, so just. And yet, humans demarcated against her. And for what? The laws of the light were unbending, stern. But to him, they were bullshit. He always hated the Holy Church, the Crusades had seen to that. But this, well, this was borderline personal. Like light through a crack, Naruto felt Asia's plight reaching out to his old conscience, beckoning it free from the facades he had built up around it. And surprisingly, it answered. It gave Naruto purpose. He had a job to do. "You just gave me more of a reason to have her back," he stated, his voice low, barely restraining the very limits of his anger. The Shinigami, reading the mood, decided to comply without further questioning. As Asia's soul began to slowly flow back into her lithe frame, her eyes opened, only to be greeted by the tearful eyes of the person who she could only assume to be one of her saviors. "Ah, hello. Thank you for taking care of me," Asia slowly whispered, deliriously sliding in and out of consciousness. This alarmed Naruto. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Shinigami's healing was absolute, and her body was otherwise unhurt. He turned to fix the specter hanging behind him with a severe, accusing glare, but all the personification of death did was shake his head. "I could return her soul, but as is the case with all sacred gear holders, her sacred gear is as much a part of her as her soul. Without it, she simply cannot survive." Asia caught on to that, and surprisingly, was not affected in the slightest by the Shinigami's oppressive presence. "Ah, so, I'm going to die?" she asked, nonplussed, her voice unable to rise above a whisper. "That's such a shame. Issei promised me that he would show me Kuo, that he'd make me meet his friends, that he'd be my friend," she spoke, her cheery tones slowly dropping. "Can I see him, one last time, mister? I'd like to see his smile once before I die. My only friend." "No, I cannot allow that." Her eyes widened a bit, but then a serene smile spread on her face. "Ah, guess that'll just be another regret I'll be taking to the grave." Naruto grabbed her hand and shook his head. "No, you won't die. You'll see Issei daily. You'll meet his friends. You'll go to school. You'll have so many friends that you won't be able to count them all. I promise." Shocked, Asia looked at him with hopeful eyes. She tried to shift in her bed, but her body wouldn't allow her. "You do that for me?" she asked, "but I don't even know your name." Naruto chuckled. "My name is Naruto. We can save our introductions for later, once you're back on your feet. And for what I'm going to do, I need you to trust me. Do you think you can do that?" Asia nodded, the strain from talking so much denying her the ability to voice her words. Having gotten confirmation, Naruto drew samsara from within his soul. The Shinigami saw this, and for once, a look of surprise passed his grotesque, inhuman features. "You'd do so much to save a life as tortuous as her? You'd go so far as to use creation itself to prolong her torment?" Naruto shook his head. No, she won't know the hate she has lived through her whole life for another day hence. I, Naruto Abaddon, will make sure that no matter what may befall her, she will be safe. I swear on my name, I will not let that smile die again. Spin, Samsara. Kartavya calls to you. Issei. Naruto had to suppress a chuckle. The teen outside had passed out due to his injuries and fatigue. He barely even responded to his name. Though the combined healing of the newly restored Twilight Healing and the Shozen Jutsu quickly saw to that. Rid of his injuries, the brown-haired teen quickly shot out of his chair, only to be greeted by Asia tackle hugging him into the ground. Why you came for me? The diminutive teen spoke into his chest, her tears slowly seeping into the shredded rags that were once his jacket and shirt. Unable to form a cohesive sentence, the boy simply held Asia closer, his teary eyes meeting Naruto's benign pools of blue. Thank you. Naruto simply nodded. To cut the tearful reunion short, in a second, the room was filled with 2 peerages worth of devils, each with a surprised look on their faces. Alerted to their sudden presence, Issei looked around, immediately paling when his eyes landed on Ria's buxom figure, and then, on the stern expression on Sona's face. Might I ask you, Issei, why you disobeyed a direct order from me and charged into angel territory? She asked, getting over her initial surprise. More so, what are you doing in Uzumaki-sensei's house? Deciding that this was a good time as any to put Issei out of his misery and save whatever was left of his cover, Naruto spoke up. I think I should be asking you that question. How did you all just appear in my house? First, Issei shows up, beaten to death, clutching little Asia in his arms, comatose. Then all of you just teleport to my house. I thought my powers were weird, but you guys take the cake. The effect was immediate. Every single person in that room save for Issei paled. But none realized the implications of what they had just done as well as Rias and Sona. Naruto had no threatening presence, he didn't radiate the feel of a sacred gear. He didn't feel like a member of any of the 3 occult factions. He could heal, sure, but there were hundreds of human-developed healing arts that utilized ki, the power of the soul. It was then that realization hit them. In their haste to act, they had made a grave error. They had just revealed the existence of the occult to a mere bystander. Oh fuck. Rias commented, and if she wasn't as prideful and stoic as she was, Naruto could have sworn Sona would have said the same. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.